for Thursday, May 6th. The time is now 4:07 p.m. Due to concerns over COVID-19 exposure, the city has implemented measures to protect our community, including the closing of council chambers and limiting public attendance to electronic means only. Members of the public may view the live meeting proceedings on Tempe Channel 11 or attend the meeting virtually through Cisco WebEx events by visiting tempe.gov/clerk for more information. The first item on the agenda is the call to the audience for issue review session items. Speakers have up to 3 minutes to address the City Council. Madam Clerk, were there any speaker or comment cards received?
Mayor, we have 3 cards to read into the record and no live speakers tonight.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go ahead and read those.
First item comes from Catherine Bowman, resident of Tempe. Catherine writes, "Dear Tempe City Council, we strongly support the funding of the full-time animal welfare position as another important position in the city's portfolio of services for residents and neighborhoods. Our neighbor feeds a number of feral cats. The cats bring him a lot of joy, and their playful antics are undeniably cute. However, with the presence of many non-fixed cats comes the inevitable mating, fighting, and excessive spraying on house walls and doors and other property throughout the neighborhood. We worked with our neighbor twice a couple of years ago to conduct trap neuter release on 7 cats. The results were good, and our neighbor was pleased because the cats became friendlier and more like pets after they were fixed. We also noticed much reduced spraying and fighting for a couple of years. The process for us as lay people, however, was quite involved and overwhelming. It required a lot of specialized knowledge and coordination. Since our first trapping, the unfixed cat population in our neighborhood has increased. As a part of a citywide effort, others in our neighborhood performed additional TNR this spring, but also found the process daunting. Given the large numbers of feral cats in Tempe, TNR will also always be an ongoing activity for neighborhoods around the city, and support for residents through this position would make a great impact. Animal welfare-related issues of all kinds, not only TNR, have implications for human and animal health, property, and neighborliness. A full-time professional to help coordinate resources and educate and support residents would make a tremendous difference." Next item comes from Mr. Ron Tapscott, resident of Tempe. Mr. Tapscott writes, "Dear Mayor Council, regarding the current discussions for a city-funded animal welfare employee. First, I'm requesting that Mayor and/or council members call on City Manager Andrew Ching and Assistant City Manager Ken Jones be called on to clarify or dispute these assumptions. Number 1, the current and active request for the above-cited position is well within the normal city budget process and has precedent. Number 2, currently this council has likewise requested additional monies be allocated for pre-K, a chief of staff position, allowances for Hometown for All initiative. The animal welfare position would be the 4th. Number 3, currently it has been reported that sufficient funds are available within current revenues. For the additional items, it would not hinder funding of the positions that were frozen during our COVID-induced financial downturn. Additionally, it has been reported that the several $million federal COVID fund allocation spreading over 2 years is discretionary money. This is said, understanding council has recently entertained assigning this to the CIP fund. And number 4, lastly, to the claim this request for the above-cited position is leaving council out of the overall process, the council, as always, will be provided a complete overview of all requested budget requests, including their own, and will be able to reassign and vote on the final budget. Thank you, Ron Tapscott, Tempe resident." Last item comes from Danella Frias, resident of Tempe, and Danella writes, "I, Danella Frias, am a resident at the Salt Complex, owned by the city of Tempe, and leased to Acentris Salt LLC. This is relating to your budget item. Based on online reviews, rents are said to be skyrocketing, and to paraphrase one neighbor, her rent has been raised 10%. Before I provide my anecdotal example or assessment, I would like to cite 3 Arizona revised statutes and 1 Governmental Accounting Standards Board statement to build the foundation for my petition to council related to housing and the budget. First, ARS 33-1329A through B reads, notwithstanding any other provisions of law to the contrary, the state legislature determines that the imposition of rent control on private residential housing units by cities, including charter cities and towns, is of statewide concern. Therefore, the power to control rents on private residential property is preempted by the state. Cities, including charter cities or towns, shall not have the power to control rents. The provisions of subsection A shall not apply to residential property which is owned, financed, insured, or subsidized by any state agency or by any city, including charter city or town. Second, ARS 33-1902 reads, residential rental property must be registered with the county assessor according to Arizona law. 3, ARS Chapter 42-6202D reads, the government lessor shall maintain a public database by county, city, and town as applicable, or post its lease agreements on a county, city, or town website where the government property improvement is located, of all government property leases that are subject to tax under this article. Lastly, the GASB Statement Number 77, Tax Abatement Disclosures, requires governments to enter into tax abatement agreements to disclose specific information about the agreements. GASB Statement Number 77 specifically reads, this statement requires the government to describe the general nature of the tax abatement information omitted and the source of the legal prohibition so that users will understand what information is missing and why that information is missing. To provide an anecdotal example, my rent has increased 25%, with the understanding that rental criteria includes the gross monthly income of all leaseholders must equal no less than 3 times the monthly market rent of the apartment. And number 2, the City of Tempe latest comprehensive annual financial report, or CAFR, for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020, includes demographic and economic statistics that reports per capita personal income of $33,256, an average household income of $79,758. In 2020, a Tempe family with a household income of $65,160 would have been able to afford my apartment. Again, said household would fall within the average household income reported in the city's CAFR and meet the rental criteria of rent not exceeding 1/3 of gross income. That same family making $65,160 in 2020 would be expected to make $81,468 in 2021 in order to afford to maintain eligibility with rental criteria. Effectively, a 25% rent increase can force out Tempe families. When I questioned the property manager on the practicability of the 25% rent increase and offered such a rent increase is effectively asking people to move, I was specifically told the increase was acceptable from the owner's perspective. Having identified the owner as the City of Tempe, where it has been widely accepted that affordable and workforce housing are essential, I am confounded that such rent increases have been made permissible in property owned by the city. Her letter does continue, but we're at our 3-minute mark. I'll make sure council has the rest of her information available. Mayor, that closes out our public comment.
Great, thank you so much, Madam Clerk, really appreciate it. Next up is item number 2, issue review session items. The first item is 2A, Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission updates, and I'll turn to Marie Raymond.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Marie Raymond, Human Services Manager, and it is my privilege to introduce the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission chairs, and they will update on this year's accomplishments. So I will turn it over to the MYAC Advisor, Senior Social Services Coordinator, Adrian Cascio, and he can introduce the MYAC commissioners that are present this evening.
Thank you, Marie. Just making sure, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. So, hello, it's a pleasure to be here, Mayor and Council. My name is Adrian Cascio, and I am the MYAC Advisor, and I have the pleasure to introduce 3 of our MYAC chairs who are here today. We have Isis Kelly, MYAC Chair. We have Sean Washington, who is our Vice Chair, and Sophia Perano, who is our Project Manager. And I will allow them to introduce themselves a little bit further. I'm going to go ahead and share our presentation here.
Hi, my name is Isis Kelly. I am chairperson of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. I am a sophomore at McClintock High School, and this is my last year of MYAC.
Hi, my name is Sean Washington. I am actually vice chair, and this is my 2nd year of MYAC, and I am actually a freshman at Tempe High School.
Hi, my name is Sophia Perano. This is my 2nd year of MYAC as well. I am the project management chair for MYAC. I go to McClintock High School, and I'm a sophomore.
Some of MYAC's history was that it was established in 1980 in response to diverse youth challenges. The commission is made up of 24 members from 8th grade to 12th grade, and students in MYAC are given the opportunity to advocate for Tempe's youth by providing input and initiatives affecting youth and youth programming.
Okay, so we all know that 2020 has been a very hectic year. This is all together has been a very tough year. So with that, we've been adapting to our new technology, and in fact, we were the first ever commission to use Microsoft Teams to do our meetings. And we'll provide a hybrid option for future meetings, just in case not everybody feels comfortable enough. People are still susceptible to the virus, so we provide a hybrid option for future meetings.
We've also made a couple of updates to our recruitment process in order to ensure that this application is as available and accessible to students as well as as fairly judged as possible. We have made our application available online to people who are interested in MYAC. In addition to that, we've also established an application review committee, which is made up of MYAC commissioners and works to really give each of these applications a lot of time and make sure that we are able to select the best possible options for MYAC. This year we had a fantastic record. We got 42 applications, which is a record for MYAC, and had fantastic candidates.
With our youth engagement, we have increased city support with our help of our assigned PIO, Susie Steckner. She has also been helping us add new website features. And we have also been in the works of developing a MYAC newsletter that will be hopefully in in Tempe high schools and in Tempe middle schools.
We've also added a new program, which we're going to talk about a little bit later as well, the subcommittees. So the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission now has subcommittees, which are going to be following up on some of the ongoing topics from Youth Town Hall last year that we learned were really important to the youth in Tempe, and they are all fully run by Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. So in terms of the subcommittees, the ones that we have this year are diversity and inclusion, team professional development, emotional well-being, environmental sustainability, and police and youth engagement. So all these subcommittees are made up of MYAC commissioners, and they work to give a little bit of special attention to the issues that have been brought up to us by the youth Tempe. So this year, the subcommittees used team breakout rooms to meet after each MYAC meeting, and also coordinated their own meetings outside of MYAC meetings as necessary, and all in an effort to accomplish projects and goals to help the city.
Okay, diving into our first subcommittee, we have diversity and inclusion. Some of our highlights that we have is we've developed recommendations and changes to the MYAC ordinance as of right now. And some of our very amazing changes, in my opinion, is that we will allow for proactive recruitment and outreach for all schools, and including non-traditional schools. This means that no matter which school you go to, whether it's in-person, online, general online, schools such as Primavera or Connections Academy, we will try to reach out and grasp you. From now, we have our memberships will start in 9th grade, meaning that we'll allow our 8th graders to be mentored by current MYAC chairpersons and MYAC members, and start that type of mentor program. We'll start the sessions. Our sessions will now start in September to allow more event planning, and just so we can get a earlier start, a good jump on everything that we want to accomplish. And this supports our strong community connections with performance measure of 2.15, and our quality of life performance measures with a 1.12 and 3.12 and a 3.13.
Another subcommittee of ours is the Team Professional Development Subcommittee. So the subcommittee's highlights this year were providing guidance on College Connect Tempe's presentation to 8th graders presented to the Tempe Elementary Middle School. And they also developed a tip sheet for 8th graders to help transition to high school. Overall, the Team Professional Development Subcommittee did a lot of great work to really ensure that we talked about not only mental health and resources, but also ensuring that people understood transitions this year. So the performance measure that this supported was financial stability and vitality, which is performance measure 5.02.
Another one of our subcommittees is emotional well-being. Some of the highlights from this year is we provided technical guidance on building a website to promote mindfulness for youth. and engage in conversations with 2 Care 7 youth specialists to proceed to process the idea of returning to in-person school. And this falls under Performance Measure 3.37.
And another one of our subcommittees is environmental sustainability. This year, environmental sustainability did a lot of work with the Office for Sustainability to help start up their newly awarded Cool Kids, Cool Places grant. That included providing youth input and guidance for developing a youth council. They worked specifically with the Office of Sustainability in order to do this, and in particular, really tried to make sure that this council was able to get off the ground and really have an opportunity to be successful for office. The sustainability and growth development was the measure that was supported, and it was performance measure 4.18.
Our last subcommittee is policing youth engagement, in which is one of the most important subcommittees to me. Some of the highlights from this year is our continued conversation with school resource officers to help understand youth and police perspectives. And one of our own MYAC commissioners served on a hiring panel for assistant police chief. This supports Performance Measure 2.06, Strong Community Connections.
Okay, now that we've kind of walked through all of our subcommittees and everything that we're trying to do, I think it's time to highlight some of the most important city engagements that we've worked with in different city departments. Sorry, totally blanked. Different city departments that we've worked with throughout this year, and that includes the Office of Strategic Management and Diversity, Office of Sustainability, the Tempe Police Department, Community Development, Community Services, and Human Services. Okay, so moving forward, what you can expect to see from MYAC is that we will actually utilize our summer programs for planning, and we will plan for youth engagement. This includes recruitment and marketing, getting our voice out there, seeing everybody like, hey, we are here, we do want to make a difference, we do want to help, and if you're interested in that, you are youth in Tempe, come check us out. Digital and in-person engagement throughout the school year, this kind of goes hand in hand with that hybrid that we were talking about moving forward. We will continue to strategically engage with city departments and to support our mutual goals. And that just goes hand in hand with our subcommittees, using our resources with each other, using the youth of Tempe on our side and using the actual city resources. And then developing a mentor curriculum for 8th grade students to better prepare them for future commissioners. And this is, our mentor program, us going through the motions, seeing if this is what you actually want to do and commit your next 3 years to.
That wraps up our presentation. So we thank you for your time, and we like to open it up for any questions or comments at this time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation, and thank you for everything that you do. The Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission provides so much value to the city of Tempe, and I know it's always so amazing for myself and the council and all of our city staff to see the next generation of leaders, frankly. I mean, it's just so exciting to hear all of you talk and all the great things that are in store. I'll look to my council right now to see if there's anyone who wants to comment. I see Councilmember Garland.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that I am so impressed. When I was looking through our council packet, I was looking at all the things you were doing. I had to keep reminding myself that this is a youth organization, and you guys are so incredibly organized, and your presentation was incredible. I'm very impressed. I love your outreach, and I love the idea that you're going to mentor 8th graders, because I think that's such a great idea, because you're really setting up the next group of people who would be looking at coming into and being a part of your organization. So I just want to say great job, guys. I'm absolutely impressed. And if you ever want to send me an invitation, I'd love to come and sit in on one of your meetings and just listen to what you guys are doing. So great job.
I just want to thank the council and especially Corey Woods for letting us come in and talk to you guys about things that are affecting our youth in Tempe today, and letting us talk to you guys and tell you about the real things that we're doing that affect and help you guys in the future.
Yeah, we really
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And I know on behalf of the entire council, we definitely do as well. I mean, the reality is one of the things that's really a hallmark of this council is trying to make sure that when we're trying to come up for policies, whether it's young people or any other group within the city, that the people who are being affected by decisions are part of the decision-making process, and that we're not simply talking at you, but that you're talking with us and telling us what you need to be successful and the things that you need to live prosperous lives. And so we're really excited to have you at the table offering all the input and the insight that you do. We're really eternally grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of council? Any comments? All right, hearing none. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So excited to see the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our meeting, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. And we are always happy to have anyone come and join and visit our MYAC meetings. So we'll definitely keep it in mind. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to do a little shifting of the agenda here. So I apologize. But I was sort of looking around, and I think this makes a little bit more sense. There's one item later on the agenda that potentially has some budget impact or position impact for the city. And I know that Mr. Jones is going to be talking to me about the fiscal year 2021-22 budget. But I'd like to see if we can go ahead and move up item number 4A, Committee of the Whole items ready for City Council direction or status update. And that will be item number 4A1, Sustainable and Livable Communities Council Committee, Animal Welfare Budget Consideration Follow-up. The co-chairs are Council Members Jennifer Adams and Council Member Lauren Kuby. And once again, I wanted to raise this because this is an item that is talking about a budget item. I think it makes sense to have this discussion before Ken presents about the full budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Council Members Adams and Kuby.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll start. So just want to let the council know that Councilmember Adams, if I could speak for her, we both heard your concerns when we last discussed this possibility back in March. Can't remember the date, but back in March. And we obviously heard there was no appetite for a permanent FTE, but we also heard appreciation for the program and for the continued need for expanding our community CAT program as well. So just wanted to mention that point. And Councilmember Adams, do you have anything to add before we go into a discussion?
No, I mean that's you said it well, Councilmember Kuby, and just want to see what we can come up with. I know that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about having some kind of intervention continue with our animals, and so I think Mr. Manager Andrew, I think you were going to talk about some ideas that you discussed with us for a compromise.
Sounds good. Thank you, Council Members Adams and Kuby. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. In the last meeting where this presentation or this proposal from the committee from council members Kuby and Adams was discussed, that proposal, as has been just mentioned, we certainly understood the consensus that what was offered would not be moving forward. At the same time, there was direction that was given to explore possible alternatives. And I think maybe for the purpose of a clearer discussion, a couple of things should be mentioned at the outset. One is that we haven't really addressed a pertinent question, which is we understand that in this fiscal year, 2021, that $10,000 was allocated by the city to fund the beginning of this cat community or trap neuter release, trap neuter return program for the purpose of trying to address the issues involving feral cat colonies within the city of Tempe. And that program has been going on during fiscal year 2021. That amount was matched by a private donation of an equal amount of $10,000, which is a budget of about $20,000. During this year, that budget has been spent down. My understanding is that there are still dollars available within that account, that it is not completely expended. But the question, I guess, is that, and I know that the last presentation did speak to some of the successes or some of the at least experiences of what has occurred, but we haven't really, as a just in terms of what would be something that staff could do or use, gotten to a sort of a threshold question, which is there an interest in having funding added into the budget, because the $10,000 that council allocated was one time for this fiscal year, and the continuation of this program, if it's the pleasure of council to do so, would require some reauthorization of dollars into the next year. What that amount looks like and how much is the other thing I think that we would want to get direction from council about. So first, is there an interest in continuing the program as it currently exists, separate from and distinct from the proposal, although obviously with some relation to the proposal that came out of the committee, but really in terms of like for like. If what is currently happening is something that council would like to let staff know that there's an interest, and then therefore dollars ought to be allocated in the 21-22 budget, then that is information that we can include in the budget that comes back for tentative adoption and ultimately final adoption at the end of this month and also into June. Just so you know,
Mr. City Manager, quick thing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Absolutely.
interrupt. I
No, go ahead.
apologize. I just saw Vice Mayor Keating's hand. I didn't know if he wants to speak now or wait, whichever you like, Vice Mayor.
I can wait till the city manager's done. Thank
Okay,
you.
sounds good. I'll call upon you right afterwards. Thank you. Sorry,
Right.
Andrew, keep going.
Sure. So, at the level of funding that has existed in this year, there has been a number of activities that involve things like transportation, coordination of the events, the purchasing of traps, bedding, et cetera, and also the cost for the providers of the TNR services. So, there's all of that. And so, but what was not included in that was an accounting for labor cost. So what we would do from this point really is the direction that we would be seeking from council. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I'll go back to Vice Mayor Keating now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager. To answer your question, Andrew, I certainly do want to see the trap, neuter, and release program continued into next year. I don't know if you saw the email from Mr. Jerry Brock earlier today, but he's offering the city $15,000 additional dollars for this effort. So if the council funded it at the same level that we did last year, that would amount to a $5,000 budget increase for this program in the next year. One suggestion I would have for this program is, I know that it's it's costly to the volunteers, not only, to take the cats in, get them spayed or neutered, the feeding them, housing them for a period of time. Maybe it would make sense to offer folks that are willing to participate in the TNR program a per cat stipend, whatever that cost may be. I'll leave it to staff, and I'll leave it to the committee that is working on this issue to come up with what is a reasonable number there. But I do think it would make sense to give these volunteers something back for their time and effort, and they are certainly doing the city a service. So I would support this council, in addition to Mr. Brock's $15,000 donation that he's just pledged earlier today. I would support giving this program another $10,000 for the next fiscal year. Again, making that a slight budget increase over last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and I wanted to reach out. Well, first of all, I want to thank Vice Mayor Keating for the support, and I also want to thank Jerry Brock. He's just a pillar in our community, and his generous donation of $15,000 to the program to continue, I think, is really speaks volumes to how important this program is. So we've heard from a lot of residents, and I guess what I would like to do is continue the pilot program and on a temporary basis for another year and see how we're doing. And I think that we need to probably have a full-time, or maybe not full-time, but 30 hours a week employee that looks over this program, manages it, and and then see where we are in a year. And because I've heard so many success stories throughout the city of residents that have had happy endings and no more spraying from the cats and the smell and everything else, and no more unwanted kittens. So I just think it's a positive program. I do think it affects our health and safety, which is always my #1 priority in the city. So I'd like to see us do this pilot program, continue it on a part-time basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Adams. So I hear support for either a potentially a full-time, but also a part-time position, perhaps. And I heard Vice Mayor Keating's comment regarding taking the $15,000 donation for Mr. Brock, the putting in another $10,000 and possibly doing some kind of a per cat stipend. I'm going to go to Councilmember Garland and then Councilmember Cubie.
I just want to say that I want to say thank you to Councilmember Cubie.
Councilmember Garland, you're really quiet.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to say thank you to Councilmember Cubie and Adams for the work that they did on this committee and for the research that they put into the animal welfare position. And I also want to thank my aide, Kristen Gwynn, for all the work that she did. And I know that took a lot of time and work for what she does. It wasn't actually too long ago that in our Tempe home, we had 2 dogs, 2 cats, a tortoise, 4 chickens, 2 horses, along with my husband, myself, and our 4 kids. And there was a lot of animal loving going on in this house. So I know how important animals are and pets are to the people in our community. But with that being said, I am not comfortable and feel it is appropriate to support a full-time or part-time position without it going through the same budget review and approval process that other City of Tempe positions go through. So I'm comfortable with saying that I'd like to see this move to the 22-23 budget process for either a full-time or part-time position. And for me, I'm supportive of the proposition that Councilmember or Vice Mayor Keating mentioned about doing a possible per capita cat catch TNR program. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Councilmember Cubie?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Before I comment, I wanted perhaps Andrew to discuss the process, because we've heard that discussed in the newspaper and also on council. And I believe Ron Tapscott from Tempe Neighborhood TNT spoke about how Hometown for All and Tempe Pre, the Chief of Staff position, the Tempe Works position just this year, and the Adaptive Rec position coordinator position we added on last meeting, and all of which I support, greatly support. Those came from the council. So those were council initiatives. And yes, there is no process for the council to submit supplemental requests. It's not how it happens. And as I've mentioned before, animal welfare has no departmental home in the city. We have PD has some relationship to animal welfare. There's the contract with Maricopa County Shelter, but we know we don't have a shelter in East Valley anymore. So we need to kind of relook at that contract. Code compliance has some responsibility with animal welfare. Neighborhood services does, but there's no home in the city of Tempe. So the council does not have a way of coming up with supplemental requests. We come up with requests through working groups and through now we're in council committees. So we come up through council committees. So before I comment about some of the other substance, Andrew, could you elaborate on that, on the process and how council initiatives have come to fruition with actual staff positions in budgets? And also at CIP, I remember late one night we approved pickleball at the very end of a budget cycle, and that came sort of out of nowhere, and that was done. But that's, of course, relates to the CIP. But Andrew, if you could relate to the discussion that Ron Tapscott mentioned, because I think you had a discussion with him earlier today.
Sure, I can comment on that. What I would say is that that we have sort of a presumptive process here in the city of Tempe, and the presumptive process that we, meaning staff, adheres to is that departments are permitted, assuming that the economic forecasting is favorable to the point where we're going to be entertaining supplementals, meaning budget requests above and beyond what our current budget is, on a regular basis, meaning that we do a call for those and they are submitted, and they are scored and ranked, and that scoring and ranking is provided to council for consideration at a work study session, as happened last month, so that you could see how we have recommended what should be funded and what should not be funded. In addition to that, council always has the option, depending on what process council decides upon, whether it be through the former committee system that existed until 2013, whether it's through the committee of the whole and committee of the whole approved managers working groups that existed between 2013 and 2020, that as items come forward for council consideration on a policy level, that if those items then obtain consensus, and they also have some resource request, whether it's positions or funding of some sort, that council can give direction to staff to include that in the budget. That can always happen. Those two things can coexist. I would just add, though, that in my recollection of the years that we've been doing it from both committee and from the committee of the whole working groups, that there have been instances that we have had council give direction that has varied. Sometimes that direction can be hold off on it and submit it as part of a supplemental. It can also be go ahead and make sure that it is earmarked, if you will, for lack of a better term, as part of the budget in the budget process. Depending on when it falls in the calendar, in advance of the submission of the city manager's recommended budget, there is opportunities, and have been in the past, where certain items that have come from council processes have been merged with the process that I talked as the presumptive process, and the two of them can coexist either as a supplemental or as a preferred sort of go ahead and make sure that's funded. So I have seen both, but I guess the point that I would just say is that we have a process, but understood within that process and overlaid is that we take direction as staff from our elected officials. And if our elected officials tell us something regarding what ought to or ought not to be in a budget, we take that direction and we execute on their vision.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. I hope that answers some of the concerns about, process and even the lateness of the process, because it was March we brought this up, and I know we appointed or did the education coordinator position. I wasn't in office then, but that was done in May, and that was a great appointment to have Marie Raymond. So as council members, we give priorities to staff, and we notice needs in the community, and we come forward with different initiatives. So I do want to talk about some of the history, because Jerry Brock is a very generous philanthropist and business person, and he came to us a few years ago with just frustration in his own building and seeing a cat colony that was not being managed. And so we told him about this idea we had. We were in the working group. Vice Mayor Keating was in the working group as well for animal welfare. And Jerry made this investment. And then he made the investment again. And then when Corey Woods, when Mayor Woods asked the city managers to come back with some ideas and let's whittle down the costs, because we designed like $148,000 for a whole program, including the relationship with Altered Tales that does the one-off spay neuters. We had designed that program like this is the most it would be. So we went back and we looked at ways that we could save, and we found savings, and we found, we reached out to Jerry Brock, and he said, I would love to see this become a full-time position, and not just deal with cats, but other animal concerns. And he was willing to donate another $15,000. Didn't even ask him to do that. He did, but he was very supportive. So let's realize that that's his intention, with his philanthropy. So I also want to talk about, this idea of a stipend. And I think that, sorry, I'm very thirsty. So I've learned a lot about the community cat program and about spay neutering. It's been an education, and I've learned about it in my own neighborhood actually a lot. And one thing that's important to note that years ago, back in 2015, the mayor started a program actually with ATLA, the Animal Defense League of Arizona. Didn't work out so well. There were customer service problems, and so we got this relationship with Altered Tales, and so they do all the one-off TNRs. So they're in North Phoenix. You can call now and you can make an appointment. It'll probably be in June. You'll get an appointment. And if you're somebody that's an experienced trapper, or you have someone you can reach out to, that works. I mean, the people that are doing this almost professionally, it's a hobby, it's a love and a passion. They will do that, make the appointments, 3 weeks ahead of time, and then they'll trap the night before and try to get the appointments in. What we're doing with the community cat program is not that. That's one element, and I'm delighted to have more funding for that. We always need that funding because it runs low. But that's for the people that are really focused on the trapping, that do rescue work, that are in Tempe. There are people that spend so much of their own money, so that's a relief. So I don't think we need the stipends. They're just delighted, and we don't need the stipends. They're delighted to be able to have that opportunity to do free spay and neutering. But again, they have to go get a trap, borrow a trap, go all the way to North Phoenix, leave the cat, and then come back that day or the next day and collect the cat. So it's a whole different thing. What we're talking about with our community cat program is something different. It's something innovative. It's what the Pulliam Foundation and our funder and Fix, Adopt, Save has said is unique, that no other city, no other group does this. The level of professional management and the level of attention and care and veterinary care that comes along with the City of Tempe program, they say it's like no other, which is why they're willing to double the number of events that they have for the city. Now let's talk about those events, those spay and neuter events. They're not, something like, we have a mobile clinic set up on a Saturday, bring your cat. It's not done like that. It's very structured and very organized. So we work with one of our 59 identified colonies. We're identifying more and more every day. And then we take a big chunk out of that colony. We go and we trap for successive nights, like 2 or 3 nights. And we trap the bulk of the cats. With one case I help with, we trapped 8 of the 11 cats in 2 nights. So those are generally situations where you have maybe a hoarder who has 10 or 20 cats, and they're not up to the physical or emotional task of doing the trapping, right? So it can be someone who's older, someone who's handicapped, someone who just can't really be bothered but wants to help and realizes that TNR is a solution, but the city can come in, and it's been a staff person that's been directing this, not so much volunteers, it's a staff person that's volunteering. So they can come into that community and really help resolve neighborhood by neighborhood this problem. Nowhere is that being done in the state of Arizona. That's what we're hearing from Fix, Adopt, Save. And that's why they're thinking about doubling the numbers of TNRs and starting in August, or excuse me, I think September, and doing it every month while the kitten mating season takes place. So again, thirsty. So I just wanted us to know, and I know I'm taking a lot of time, I apologize, I know our time is short, but it's really important to know the difference. So I come back to council and I say, we have this program, it's successful. Right now, the volunteer works 10, 15, 20 hours a week, depending, right? And that's her own time, and that's over the weekend. But that is not enough. And I hate to say it, but we're not responding to the need. There are calls that have come in, people reporting colonies 2 months ago, and we're not attending to them. This program has exploded. It went from 4 neighborhoods to last year, we opened it up to the city, and there's like 10, 20 calls about it every day. It is an exploding need in the community. And show me a program in the city. I know Vice Mayor Keating, you were very frustrated that Tempe Works didn't have a staff person. I agree, we need to staff Tempe Works, and we're doing that in this coming budget year. But show me a program in the city that doesn't have staff. We have to recognize that we have to staff a program like this. It's not about stipends. It's not about the community volunteers. We are always going to have community volunteers, and bless their hearts. Those are the people that we're working with to do education and outreach and to work in communities, because there are a lot of stresses. There are a lot of conflicts with cats and our neighbors, and we're trying to resolve that. I pointed out there was one fellow who came to a community meeting upset about the cats in his neighborhood. And by the time he left, he was offering to build a feeding station to help. He recognized that the cats needed to all be fed at the same time, and then they could be more trapped more easily. So we just have to deal with this issue about full-time. It has been run part-time with employee volunteer hours, but it's nowhere near enough the need now. And this program can't exist without staff. The Alter Tails, yeah, we can put 10,000 in, and we can go back to the way we did it way before. Just like, yep, call 3 weeks at a time, get yourself a trap, get yourself up there. That is not what we're talking about with the community cat program. there is so much administrative time, education time, and working with people who don't participate in TNR is trying to educate them and realize, and it's helpful to have a counseling background and tell people, we appreciate that you have 20 or 30 cats, but let's help manage them for the health of the cat, for the health of the community, for your relationship with your neighborhood. There is more than 40 hours a week of work right now on it, but what I think would happen with the continuation of this program is that we would be able to get it under control so that we could move into doing more holistic animal welfare work across the city. And I don't think it can be staffed with less than that. So I do want to say one more thing, and that is, Corey, Mayor Woods, you asked us to come back, and I believe in compromise. And so I was putting forward a full-time position with FTE, with everything, and with all the operating costs and the contract with Altered Tales. So I was putting that forward for $148,000. So we looked in and we worked and we came down to, we think that this can be done for about $100,000. We think if we could get authorization from the council, say no more than $100,000, that is something we can use not to just continue what we're doing, but to really meet the need that's not being met right now. And I'm hopeful that you'll all realize that if we continue this and don't really kind of seize the moment, if we want to bring it back next year, we're going to have to start all over. We'll have to start from scratch. 381 cats have been spayed and neutered with this program, with Fix Adopt Save. The intensive neighborhood-specific program. 381. Think about all those cats that weren't born because of that. And that is a remarkable result, but we could be doing so much more. And so I understand the reticence not to go full-time permanent. That's a big commitment for a city. We thought we had made the case with this 14-month pilot. So what I'm asking is, like, let's do a trial, let's do a pilot, let's just see in the next year if we can make this a reality and look for more grants for operations. We know that generally grants aren't available so much for labor, but we also know that Jerry Brock's funding comes unencumbered, so that could be used to defray labor costs. So I would ask for authorization to just say, let's try this out, purely a pilot. We'll look at another year. Let's not spend any more than $100,000 for everything, for the Altered Tales relationship, for all, that was expensive, all the TNR that goes on in an ad hoc one-off way. And so that is a substantial cut and break from what we were proposing earlier, 148,000. It's, fully 33%. And that's what I'm asking council to not let this program die, because this program will die. And it's not because, the volunteers are going to be there, but that's always been the case. And that's where the Altered Tales comes in. I'm talking about the neighborhood specific community cat program that is a program that funders are saying, hey, you guys do this and nobody else does. This is something to be proud of. This is something to hang our hats on. And with that, I yield back to council and hope that you'll consider just a pilot for 1 year. We've had successful cases where, the sustainability office, where we did that and we found, lo and behold, 2.4 million in funding. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying that we need to give this program a chance, and just stopping it in its tracks is not going to give it the chance it needs. It's going to really kill it. So with that, I ask for other council members' point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yep. Hey, thank you, Mayor. I definitely appreciate that. I guess just a couple things I want to clarify, and some programs were brought up and in regards to the funding process, and I just kind of want to redirect a little. And one of them was the adaptive rec budget, which was actually approved in 2019 through the supplemental process, but there was an error and it was left off. That's why we had that discussion and it was brought back. And I think, Mayor, to your hometown program, which we all were enthusiastic and excited about, we only just fronted the money with the intent of it being backfilled with money we knew that was coming in. So, to me, this is like completely, totally different. When we've gone through a very strenuous budget process that really had our departments advocating and telling us why it was so important just to get their positions that were frozen back. So I agree here 100% with Councilmember Garland about process. I'm a process person. I don't like to take things out of the process that I really truly don't believe is even truly vetted. in the sense of understanding what our contracts do now, other than the fact that the contract is in my packet, which is great and I can read that. But what's working well, what's not working well, that's what I would expect to see in a proposal and would hope to see next year, as I won't support this the proposal the way it is right now. I won't skirt the process. I think that's really important. And one of the things that is important to our departments and our leaders, that, you know, we continue to exhibit good faith and really truly believe in them and what they're doing, and understanding and recognizing their priorities as they try to do really great things for our community in all kinds of different areas. So I will completely support Vice Mayor's recommendation in regards to, let's get that program. Thank you, Jerry Brock, for what you do and what you've continued to always do for this city. I know this is a passion of yours, and I certainly thank you for that. I don't believe this program will die if we get it to it. Can it be better? Absolutely. Can we have a better comprehensive plan and overall thought process and vision for what we want in the future? I certainly think so. How does this all align with our strategic priorities, you know, as a council? What's the tie there? So I would support, you know, doing that. I think you said $10,000, Vice Mayor. I'm fine with that if that's what we need to do. I'm not even really sold on a stipend right now, because I feel like that kind of convolutes things. But I mean, if that's part of the process moving forward. But other than that, that's pretty much where I am, Mayor. And you know, like I said, we'll work with the thoughts that the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Garland recommended. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Just want to make a quick comment, then I'm going to go to Councilmember Navarro. So from my perspective, looking at this, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to Councilmembers QB and Adams for coming back with the proposal. I know that the first proposal, there were some concerns raised by council about this, and you diligently went back and worked with staff and tried to find ways to come up with something that you thought might be a little bit more palatable to the group. So I appreciate, you know, your willingness to spend the time and the hours trying to do that. And I know, frankly, that you both spent hours trying to come up with a different kind of solution to move this item forward. So I want to say thank you on that front. I also did want to say, I think someone made the comment earlier, and I made it during the first meeting that we did about this item, was to thank Kristen Gwynn for all of her work on this. I can definitely tell you from a lot of the residents that I speak with and people that many times do email the council, they talk about the wonderful job that she does administering the trap, neuter, release program throughout the city. I know that we do currently have 4 contracts that deal with animal welfare, but trap, neuter, release is not actually covered in those 4 contracts. And so she's doing all this work, frankly, on a volunteer basis and doing an exceptional job at it. So I just wanted to tell her personally and just say it for her, but also for the public, just thank you for all your work. You're truly doing exceptional work. I see the benefit in this situation. I'm just sort of, you know, seeing the conversation that's going around the table. I mean, I do see the benefit of having a person in a position, like, especially kind of even at this point, because it doesn't sound like we're talking about at this point a full-time position. We're talking about something that might be contract or part-time perhaps. I do see benefit to that, because the reality is, if you do actually have a person in a job who's serving as a single point of contact, who has the knowledge and the expertise, I definitely do see a benefit to that when it comes to this issue. And it is something that I worked on many years ago when I was a member of the city council. And so it's something that I've been sort of actively involved in, kind of off and on, for probably 5 or 6 years now. So I do see the benefit of actually having someone in a position, even if it is just simply part-time or through wages, to actually be kind of that single point of contact. That being said, my biggest concern overall is just making sure that the TNR program continues in some capacity. I think that it really is a valuable program. It's been a huge hit with our residents, and I do think it's something that we need to find a way to continue. Because I do think that if we don't, I think we're going to be getting a lot more concerns and emails and phone calls from residents saying that, you know, that there's been cat colonies that are frankly beginning to overrun certain neighborhoods of the city. And I know we all collectively as a council want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I think having a person in a position of that, you know, a position like a part-time or kind of a temporary kind of wages or contract position would be helpful to have that single point of contact. But that's my position on this. And I want to make sure I go to Councilmember Navarro. I know he's had his hand up for quite some time.
Thank you, Mayor. Hands a little numb. but I'm okay. Anyways, now I have to say, you know, obviously with Jerry Brock and his donation is tremendous, and then if we can match it, that's great. I think with what you're saying, you know, trying to have someone coordinate that, I think with the money that we're getting from Brock and what we're donating, if that can suffice, then I'm fine with that. But as my stand goes from previous meetings with the position being filled, I can't support it at this point. I can have it supported as we go through the next process this next year, along with some other information that's tagged along with it. Obviously, with the program, you can get input from our various counterparts, and I know Councilmember Kubi has stressed or has talked about a few of those entities, but to have the sit-down discussion to show and understand the values of what their job is, what our jobs are within the city and our scope of the city, what we have to provide for our residents, to try to see if we can find some coordination with those entities. If it's a nonprofit that comes into play to help coordinate some program like that, so be it. And I think that'd be a great win for us down the road. But I think that we need more information because I don't know the expansion of this program. I know if we start with one individual part-time going into the full-time, we start going down the road of how big does this program get. So where I stand at is when we have our victim, victim advocacy person that's going to be helping out with rape victims and helping out police with getting that process going with coordination of help and wraparound services. Right now, as I stated, we can't, as within the police department, get those that information back, those records of what has gone on back in a timely manner. We're so behind in the support staff within, that's just an example of that area of one thing, to help that program out, which we just approved. We still don't have all the wraparound services or all the support mechanisms to support that program in a efficient way. The other thing is when we talk about 100,000, and I'm going to always say this, our Care 7 units are tremendous. People do not know unless you call 911 the value of this program. It helps people within drastic need, not in a medical situation, but maybe in a mental or addiction or housing or what it may be. But we don't even have full funding for this program. We have to use grant funding for this program. So those are things, that's just a small example, and there's many more. I can probably go down that what we are doing or where we're at in terms of our money and where we're behind at. I got to have, you know, security in that those things or those programs that have support staff are being taken care of. And in addition with the 53 positions that we still have to fill. So there's some things that I would like to get more information on. I'm going to support going forward with the money for sure. And I love Jerry Brock bringing that donation in. If we can fund it out of that money that we have to help someone support that for the time being, I'm all for that too. But I just wanted this thing to go through till next year, get some more information on it, have a sit down discussion, not just the presentation that like we're having right now, but I really would like to have the council have a sit down discussion on the value of what this program looks like and explain in thorough detail along with the other departments within the city and how it coordinates with those departments, in addition with the outside departments from outside the city. So that's where I stand right now. And I'm not saying this is not a valuable program. I know it is. But I just wanted to go through a process to make sure our checks and balances are there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. So it sounds like we have consensus. I'm going to go to, I know there are a couple more hands up, but we do have consensus, it sounds like, to do the additional $10,000 contribution to the program, to talk to Mr. Brock about possibly securing the $15,000 donation. I know there's still a little bit of a question around the per cat stipend issue. But I've heard 4 council members say that that's the direction that they would like to take. But I want to go to Councilmember Adams and then Councilmember Kubi.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. Andrew, this is a question for our city manager. How many temporary employees do we have at the city of Tempe, Andrew? Approximately?
I'm trying to think in my mind between seasonal temporaries, which would be like lifeguards and things like that, versus benefited temporaries or people who are working 20 hours if they work 20 hours or more, ASRS requires us to make contribution to state retirement. I don't know the exact number. I know that when we had to stop a lot of the programming that we did last year because of the pandemic, we had to notify quite a few temporary seasonal workers, which would include lifeguards and similar, that they were not going to be able to work anymore. I'm not comfortable with this, but I can find out for you real quick and get it. It's a few hundred, I believe. That's just off the top of my head.
Well, at one point it was 700.
There you go.
If my memory serves me correct. So anyway, there's hundreds of, my point is there's hundreds of temporary employees in the city, correct?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, and with this program, with this one position at 40 hours a week, would it take away from other programs? I'm not talking a full-time benefited person, I'm talking a 40-hour temporary employee. Would this take away from other programs?
You know, those are always interesting, somewhat difficult questions to answer in the abstract. I mean, the issue is this, I guess, the way I'd look at it is to your point is there funding that we can find if it's the will of council for us to find that funding? The answer is we would do so. And the hope would be that we would do so in a way where, you know, that everything else would be held harmless, right? There would have to be, for instance, if council has already told us, you know, these are the authorized positions within the city, we wouldn't take an authorized position and utilize that funding unless we were to expressly come back to council and ask, do you want us to divert funding from something that is already in the budget to this potential funding opportunity? If it comes out of another source, for instance, if it was, you know, taken from contingency, then contingency is unspecified specifically for the purpose of allowing council to make contingency decisions based upon whatever the necessity might be during the middle of a budget year. And that also assumes that that's not taking from otherwise specified budget items. So that's just a couple. Another consideration, of course, would be, can there be other savings or revenues that come from any budget item that could operate as a sufficient offset so that the budget is ultimately neutral? And that is something, again, depending on council's direction, is something we could certainly explore.
And Andrew, can you give me approximately how much vacancy savings we've had in the last year?
You know, since I know Ken's on the line, I will defer to him for the actual numbers. You know, some of that vacancy savings is hard to apply as it was unapplied because we created vacancies on purpose and froze positions in order to have a balanced budget. So I wouldn't include those. And some of those went through the process and have been unfrozen as a supplemental. But I would defer to Ken to tell us just a rough estimate as to if we had positions that were held vacant that were not frozen, then those would be the ones that I would count as vacancy savings, I think, in the strictest sense.
Okay. Ken, do you have that information?
Thank you, council member. We budget every year, assuming that there are vacancy savings, and we include that in the forecast. It varies from year to year. Anywhere, it could be 3 to 5% of our total personnel costs in any given department. So we forecast a savings for vacancy when we do our forecast. So it has been accounted for already, is my point. It isn't like if somebody leaves and we leave the position open for 2 weeks that we have savings. It was probably forecasted that way.
Well, I remember being in public works, and we would put temporary, per the need of whatever the situation was, we would hire temporaries and use our vacancy savings, which is usually actually a large amount of money, to hire temporary employees. So I guess my point is, you know, I've been through this many times, and that is how that we did it for many years, and I know that we still do that. So it's not out of the process. That was actually common practice. And so those of you that haven't been in that kind of situation in the city, that's how we commonly operated, and I'm sure we still do. So we have a need out there, and our residents have been very clear about the need. And I report to the residents of Tempe, and this isn't out of the process. This is not out of the process. It simply is not. This is something that we need to respond to. And I think it's a very simple, solution. I think it's awesome that Jerry Brock has given us so much money. It's very little money that the city would have to contribute. I think we have an $800 million budget overall. So we're probably looking at, I don't know, $70,000 or so, give or take, given Jerry's contribution also. And I think we need to have a 40-hour-a-week person on a pilot program for a year, and have them gather all the statistics and everything else. Because if we just abandon this program now, we have to start all over, and that seems silly. We have to look at big picture, and in a year, in 2 years, will it matter? Will there be a lot more cats on the street, and people's health and safety, and the smell and the odor? Our residents want this resolved, and that's what my number one priority is. What do our residents want, and what do our neighbors want? And they want this to continue. So I'm basing this on my years of knowledge, working at the city of Tempe and working with budgets. I operate a $7.5 million budget myself, and I know how this system works. And I, over the last 30 years, I saw many things added towards the end of the budget cycle, given what council wanted. So that's where I'm coming from. You know, pre-K is a good example, but we do have a lot of temporary employees. This is a common practice, and it is based on the health and safety, which is our number one strategic priority in the budget. So thank you. I appreciate your listening, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Okay, I'm going to take one last comment from Councilmember Cubie. Since we've reached consensus on this item, but I'm going to take her comment, then we're going to move on to the next item. But Councilmember Cubie.
First of all, thank you, Councilmember Adams. You've been such a champion of this issue and so responsive to the residents and the needs of the community. And we have to be clear here, though, that we can't just feel good that we're assigning or allocating 10,000 and then the problem is resolved. It needs to be clear. I need to be clear with all of you that this program ends without staff. Show me a successful program that doesn't have staff. Show me any program in the city that doesn't have staff. There'll be no more staff volunteer hours available for this program. It's not sustainable or reasonable to expect that we should get staff hours for free. And it's really important to note that the funders of Fix It Up, Save, and Grant, every time they do one of these events, which takes weeks of preparation and an entire week of someone's, 25% of their time during that week. I mean, 25% of their time of that month. Sorry, I'm getting garbled here. But the Fix It Up, Save relationship, that's every time we do one of those events, it's $4,000 cost share, right? So the funders have not committed to supporting a part-time staff program. They certainly have not committed to supporting that with no staff at all. So we're really kind of in a dire situation here. We need to be aware of what we're doing, and we need to actually talk about policy here. The funders, they recognize how much need there is, and without professional, adequate management that we've been providing, that is really to our credit, the credit of our city, they say they won't be continuing with us. And let's be clear, again, there'll be no community CAP program without staffing. You need to have staff. Our staff volunteer can't continue to give her free time. It's not fair to her. It's not fair to the two people that she reports to. And it's not appropriate for us to ask that person to continue with that. So our funders, Fix It Up, Save, and the funder that comes through Fix It Up, Save, they can't commit to a part-time staff program, as it won't be at the level of expertise and professional management that they have come to expect. And we've all spoken about Jerry Brock and how generous he is. Be aware that his offer of donation was to help fund a staffed program. So we can't assume that that money will be there. I mean, we'll all try and convince him, but he was intending it to, hey, I want to help. I see that you have some difficulty. I see you want to cut the cost down. I want to help you to cut the cost down. So would $15,000 help to cut the cost down to get us full-time staff? And that is what he was intending. So, you know, putting a little bit more money into Altered Tales, always good. You know, that's always a good thing. It'll allow people who are already doing TNR in the neighborhoods to do it for free. It's not going to do anything about the folks that are left out of the process, the elderly, the infirm, those who don't have a clue, those who don't have much interest, but their neighbors certainly do, and they want to see some management of the colony. So they're going to be left without staff support as well, because it's difficult to get appointments, and to have a staff person managing all of that is also a valuable use of the program and the program's time. So just in conclusion, you know, without having a gatekeeper, those funds are going to be used up at Altered Tales in record quick time. We use it up very quickly. And while we might provide free TNR for a few months, the community CAP program is going to end. And that is where we're being innovative. We make waves in the desert. This is where we are making waves. We're doing something that no other city in Arizona is doing it. And people are taking notice. Funders are taking notice. And there's no guarantee that we can just bring it back next year fully vetted, fully, you know, fully realized. We're going to lose a lot of goodwill with our funders who've invested and they have an expectation of us. For every cat we TNR, 2 to 3 more unneutered new cats will be born by the time we revisit. So, I mean, think about that. It's a hard cycle to follow, you know, but we're making inroads, and we're going to leave that behind without staffing. And I can't believe I'm having to ask this of you, you know, giving the passion and dedication and expertise that we have as staff members of council who've worked on this program for the past 14 months. And then to see you say, this is going to continue. It's just, we're living in a dream world. I need you guys to understand this program is going to end. And we follow it for committee members who maybe you're suggesting that city management, the process wasn't right. I want to let you know that we have followed the city manager and the deputy city manager's advice at every step along the way. Every step along the way. I also want to remind you, we had an innovation fund a few years ago, $500,000 that we appropriated. That was council directed. We funded council directed initiatives and positions many times in my course of serving on this council. So with that, I realize we've lost this battle. I'm deeply disappointed in the council, and we'll have to see, you know, what happens in the future. But I had really high hopes that Tempe would continue to innovate and would continue to respond to the resident need. And thank you, Councilmember Adams, again, and thank you so much to the mayor for supporting and championing this. I so appreciate your perspective, your holistic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Cubie. All right. Next up, okay, we have I'm going to go back here to item 2B, which is fiscal year 2021-22 budget follow-up, including public safety personnel retirement system, otherwise known as PSPRS. Ken?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. I'm Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager, Chief Financial Officer, and Mark Day, our Budget Director, is joining me. He's going to be running a PowerPoint for me in a second here. So I just wanted to remind you, Mayor and Council, on April 22nd, we did our final budget review session, and at that time we said we would come back on this date, May 6th, and with any unresolved issues. There were no unresolved issues at that meeting that the City Council wanted us to report back on, so we don't have any of those. And if things came up in the interim, we thought we would address those tonight. I also want to remind you that we will be back on May 27th for the tentative budget adoption. So you'll have another chance on May 27th if you want to discuss any item in the budget. That's the day we'll come back and load up your council packet with all of the budget information that we've received so far and all the direction we've received from you. So as I said, Mayor, we only have one issue that I want to bring up tonight that wasn't addressed at the last meeting, and that was the public safety retirement system and our funding strategies for that. Mark's going to share a screen for you. And I also want to say that please, the public safety personnel retirement system, I'm going to call it PSPRS from going forward. PSPRS is a bit confusing, and feel free to interrupt me during the presentation if I start using too many acronyms or if something isn't clear to you, because we want to make sure you have a clear understanding of everything that goes on within this system. So next slide, please, Mark. at the end of the presentation, Mayor, we'll ask whether the proposal tonight that we have for a funding strategy meets your needs, or if you have any other suggestions, or if you have any other questions for us. We definitely need your feedback tonight. We have a performance measure to maintain our GO bond rating at the highest level, at the AAA level. This is pertinent to that. Our public safety retirement system has been, our contributions to that system have been increasing significantly over the last several years. The system itself has become more unstable over the last several years. We have this conversation every single year with the bond rating agencies. They're well aware, and it's not the city of Tempe, it is all members of the public safety retirement system. So the bond rating agencies are keenly aware of this, and we have done a good job of allaying their concerns by making contributions early and by making sure that we didn't extend our amortization period. We stayed at the very shortest amortization period. So we've done everything we can, but this definitely relates to how our bonds get rated. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit so that you can get comfortable and the public can get comfortable with what the PSPRS is. It is the retirement system for our sworn personnel in police and fire. The uniqueness of this system is, although all of the members of the system get the same retirement benefits, they each maintain separate accounts. As a matter of fact, the members, including the city of Tempe, have separate accounts for their police sworn employees and for their fire sworn employees. So each police and fire department within each member city, county, or other organization has a separate plan. That's somewhat unique. It's not like the Arizona State retirement system. You need to understand that uniqueness. So, like I said earlier, almost all of the members have an unfunded liability in this plan. City of Tempe is no different. Our unfunded liability, we refer to it as an unfunded liability. You can see here on the screen that it's technically the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, which means when you take into account all of the actuarial assumptions, it's the difference between what you should have in your fund and what you have in your fund. So you can see that the combined police and fire, the city has about $340 million in an actuarial unfunded accrued liability. Next slide, please. So there are several causes for the unfunded liability. And like I said, it's system-wide in PSPRS. A lot of it has to do with assuming some investment return. They were assuming at some point 9% for many years. They weren't earning 9% over a long haul. In some years, they were earning more than that. But over the long term, they weren't earning what they assumed they would earn. So all of the money sitting in PSPRS to pay those pension obligations was not earning the interest rate they assumed. The legislature has changed benefits over time. There are permanent benefit increases that have been adjusted. And the actuarial assumptions that the PSPRS implies have changed over time. There are some other small factors, but there are reasons for the unfunded liability, none of which are underpayments by the city of Tempe. The city of Tempe has paid its required payment every year on time. So it's not that, it is the system that is causing the issues. Next slide, please. So there has been recent reform that has helped. I've listed some of them. I'm not going to read them all to you, but there have been reforms that have been approved by the legislature. And I just want to say the issues are being addressed. The greatest of the largest impact of which is that new members at a certain point were put into a new tier, a tier 3, which has a different benefit program. So they did not diminish the benefits of the members who existed at the time, but the benefits changed for new members at a certain point. Next slide. The city of Tempe, like I said, has also I think it was 2017, the legislature said, everybody's in trouble here. Let's allow these cities to expand and move back their amortization period to 30 years. The city of Tempe did not choose that. They chose the 20-year at the time. It's currently at 17. We are paying as much as we can into the program to get that unfunded liability paid down. We've made payments early and we've assumed in our projections in our long-range forecast that we bring to you, we do not assume what they're telling us our liability will be. We have actuarial software that we've purchased now that says you should be assuming a larger payment than that. So this has changed recently. When PSPRS changed over their board and hired new actuaries, they actually had meetings with all of the member cities and said, what we used to call your recommended contribution or your required contribution is really just a recommendation because you all have different plans. I'm sorry, we all have the same plan, but because you all have different accounts, you should figure out for yourself what your liability is and pay accordingly. We have done that. Next slide. So what are the solutions that we're looking at? What we're looking at is completely paying our unfunded liability by issuing municipal obligations. They would be taxable, but municipal obligations that we would assume we would pay about 2.25% on current rates, and assume that we would invest all of that in the PSPRS, and their current assumed rate of return, like I said, it used to be 9, they have been lowering it every year for the last several years, is currently 7.3. If they actually earned 7.3 and we're only paying 2.25%, that arbitrage or that earning in excess of what you're paying would be good for us. It would help us pay that down significantly faster. So obviously the savings that we might garner here are based on those two rates. If by the time we go to market to issue those obligations, the rates have increased a little bit and PSPRS earns a little bit less than what they're assuming, then we wouldn't have quite as much savings. However, we've been working with RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. Kurt Freund has been working with us, and we're making estimates. And our current estimate is, and you'll see in your packet, I've given you a very conservative estimate of a savings of about $120 million or 125 over 16 years. It could be better. It just depends on what the variance between those two rates is. We also know that we won't wait for PSPRS to tell us what our minimum contribution. We will be paying off that unfunded liability, and we will know exactly what the payments are for that every year. So that level payment helps as well. So when we issue these taxable municipal obligations, what we would do is issue certificates of participation. So let me explain those a little bit. You're all very familiar with general obligation bonds. Those are bonds that we issue every year. We get the voter authorization to issue those, and they are backed by the full faith and credit of the city. Those are GO bonds. We also issue sometimes revenue bonds in which we back those bonds with the tax revenues that the city brings in. We don't have capacity in either of those for this kind of debt, and we wouldn't want to tie up all of our capacity with this kind of debt. So what we're talking about in certificates of participation is pledging existing city assets, assets that everybody knows the city is not going to be abandoning. A city hall, a library, a fire station, a water plant, things that we know we will never give up. When you pledge those as backing for the rate, for the bonds, you get a good rate. That's what we would be doing here. That's what certificates of participation would allow us to do. Next slide. So when would we propose to do this? In my opinion, the sooner the better. I think interest rates are not going to go down. I think they will start creeping up. I think this is one of the reasons we can do this is because of current interest rates. If we had looked at doing this several years ago, it would not have made sense. It makes sense now. We are going to move forward with this. With your blessing, we will come back to you in the not too distant future with the details of it. So in other words, which properties would we pledge? What would be the issuance of the bonds? What would be the timing of it? We would come back to you as soon as possible on this. So we're looking at a pretty accelerated timing in order to do this. Our next step would be to start identifying those properties. You don't have to identify the entire $340 million. If you pledge about half of that or a little more than half in actual property value, you would get the rate you're looking for. So what we're looking at tonight, Mark, I think the next slide is just questions. What we're looking at tonight is telling you that we propose to put an additional $340 million contingency in next year's budget. And the reason we have to do that is we would issue bonds and get the proceeds, that would be our revenue, but then we would have to pay PSPRS, that would be our expenditure. We can't spend that money unless the funding authorization is in the budget. So what we propose to come back to you with for our tentative budget on May 27th is an additional $340 million contingency only for this purpose. Covered a lot of material, and I'm happy to answer any questions, Mayor, not only related to this strategy of funding PSPRS, but also anything else that you want to ask us or contribute toward the budget, so we come back to you on May 27th with all of the answers for those. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate the presentation, as always. Council, any comments or questions for Ken? Wow, hearing none. Ken, it sounds like you you might have full consensus to go forward with everything you just outlined. So,
okay, Mayor.
Unless it's something you want further clarity on from all of us.
No, that's what we needed, Mayor. Thank you.
Sounds good. Excellent. Thank you so much, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have item 2C, which are long-term transit fund plan and service changes. And I'm going to go ahead and call upon Marilyn DeRosa.
Hi, Mayor. Excuse me. Hi, Mayor. I'm actually going to just turn this straight over to Eric Iverson, and he's going to walk you guys through it.
You guys all see me and hear me? Thank you, Marilyn. We are pulling up the presentation. I'm Eric Iverson, the city's transit manager in the engineering and transportation department. I'm here with Sam Stevenson, our senior transportation planner. And we are here to share. We have a lot of information to cover. We'll try to go through it as quickly as possible. We're here to share an update on where we're at with all of our efforts related to balancing the long-term transit fund, as well as the related service changes, and then some updates on some other items related to the fund. Next slide. So obviously the council's very familiar. We appear quarterly to give you updates on this program, and these are the two performance measures that are linked to our effort in the transit program, the 20-minute city, as well as the transit satisfaction survey. Next slide. So these are the specifics on the items we're going to cover today. We'll give you a little bit of an update on the transit fund itself, kind of where we're at and what progress has been made so far. And then specifically get into the service changes, reductions, and optimizations that we are proposing for October of 2021, later this year. A little bit of update on the transit advertising possibilities, as well as next steps for the study on our bus service scenarios into the future, and some updates on our new bus shelter designs and our orbit fleet. We are asking for direction tonight on the October 2021 service changes and for next steps on the advertising effort. Next slide. These are, as you are all familiar, the program elements that are funded through the transit tax that passed in 1996. We did a breakdown here of not just all the programs that are funded, but how much goes towards the operations of each of the programs. So just a couple things to highlight here. In the top section, we have all of our bus and rail operations, which account for nearly 60% of our annual operations costs. And then we have some smaller items. The streetscape, pathway construction and operations would be in your capital expenditures, debt service. And then some of the smaller items, the operations costs related to our facilities, as well as paratransit. Next slide. And then we just want to keep reminding the council that we do feel that we have a really successful program, that the investment the community's made with the passage of the tax and the expansion and implementation of the services that we provide in the transit program has led us to the point where we have the highest per capita transit ridership in the region. And we have a really strong program citywide of our streetscapes and pathways. But we do find ourselves at this point in time as being more of an operations fund and maintaining what we have and not really so much an expansion fund. That's going to be a longer term challenge for us if we want to expand to try to find the money to do that. We are, as we continue to tell you, experiencing, as is the rest of the world, a pretty dramatic hit to our public transit program because of the pandemic. That affects our ridership, of course, and then the fare collection associated with that as well, which is part of what replenishes our fund. We're in the middle of working with Phoenix and our partners at Valley Metro to introduce a new fare collection system in the region that we think will address and clean up and make more accessible how people buy tickets and the correct price for those tickets. We look at some of the other current trends that include just a little bit of uncertainty in our economy. We see a not as much of a decrease in the sales tax revenue in the last year, which is good. Transit costs have been increasing, so we want to just be really careful with that and continue to work with our partners at Valley Metro to rein that in. And then we continue to characterize our fund as one that we are utilizing right now some of our reserve fund. This is the time to do it. We're in a pandemic, so it is appropriate, we feel. But again, in the long term, for the 10-year forecast for our fund, we need to bring in more revenues than we are expending. Finally, we wanted to mention that the federal relief that has been coming through, as you're all familiar, does help us. It's a one-time infusion of monies, so it only sort of postpones what we need to address in the long term. Next slide. One final slide on kind of where we're at with our fund. As you all are all familiar, we have been undertaking for the last year, really since the pandemic started, looking at ways in which we can balance our fund. So a lot of the strategies you've already heard about, I'll just highlight a few of them here. We are continuing to optimize as best we can our transit service, find efficiencies. We are making reductions, as you're aware of, and that's what Sam will go into in the next couple slides. We are very careful, as you hear with all the other departments of the city, about any vacancies that come up, any efficiencies that we can create in our personnel costs, so we continue to monitor that really closely. I'm very proud of the fact that I think we have a really lean and efficient team that does a lot of great work. We have limited, partly because of the pandemic, but partly because of our budget, a lot of our public events. And just focused, we've tried to focus our funding on the service that we provide and the infrastructure that we maintain throughout the whole city. Our East Valley Bus Operations and Maintenance Facility and the Tempe Transportation Center, we have reduced the annual expenditures there, but we want to make sure that we are maintaining those buildings in really good quality and that we're careful to keep in mind the life cycle costs or the long-term costs of the buildings so that they don't go into disrepair. We have limited, again, our capital expansion, and that's largely due to the fact that we've really built out most of the system that we promised the voters in 1996 with the passage of the transit tax, but we have slowed that program down. We continue, as I mentioned before, really working closely with Valley Metro to control all of our operational costs related to the service that's provided in Tempe and in the region. That's daily work, and we have had some good recent success with that. We do have some real estate and leasing holdings that the program has that we continue to look at maximizing that. For example, the Fifth Street Market at the Transportation Center, services like that we want to introduce and that can help bring in revenues for our fund. Long term, we look to the regional transportation plan and the next extension of the regional transportation tax, that's called Proposition 400E. And we look at ways in which that could bring in maybe more money than it brings in today for our program. So the good news is that the work that we've done in the last year, we feel has made a significant impact in balancing the fund in the 10-year forecast. We have work to do, and we'll continue to do that and bring back updates to you. But we are showing in the 10-year forecast that we do have the fund revenues exceeding our expenditures. Some of that is based on a lot of the work that I've talked about, and also the assumption that we can control our costs related to our service operations for rail and bus. Next slide. And then before I hand it over to Sam, I wanted to just give a little bit of bigger picture on what we're looking at for our transit service changes. I know the council's been seeing public comments, and we've had a lot of public meetings, and we're continuing to take public comment from the region. And this process of reducing service is a tough one. We recognize that. We don't want to impact anyone's lives negatively, of course. So we have been very careful in what we're proposing to reduce in service, and continue to look at the feedback we're getting related to that. So we're mindful of the difficulty of these decisions. We want to be data driven and look at how any impact is affecting other parts of the community. And so we hope that any changes, any reductions that we make would be temporary, but we do feel like we do have to move forward with those, and recognize the fact that these are tough decisions to make, and we don't take it lightly. With that, I think I will hand it over to Sam for the next couple of slides to go through the specific changes that we are proposing for October.
Hey, thanks, Eric. So here's a quick overview of our outreach efforts so far. We held 2 public meetings and presented to multiple commissions. We had information posted at bus stops and on buses, and we had thousands of views between our social media posts, emails, and our transit changes webpage. We do feel like our outreach efforts were successful. We had 118 unique responses submitted through our survey, and the majority of those respondents were transit users. So the first thing we're proposing for October is a span of service reduction across all of our local bus routes. The 14 local bus routes that Eric mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, and these run on all of our major arterial streets all throughout Tempe. We're recommending a reduction to the hours or span of service in all of these local bus routes by 2 hours in the evening, Monday through Saturday. I want to start out by saying that our proposal to do this is very heavily driven by data. The data that we reviewed and presented to you all at our last transit service update indicated that less than 2% of all boardings on local buses in Tempe occur after 11 p.m. So we do feel as though, if we advance this proposal, the impacts will be minimal. And as you can see, Eric did allude to this earlier in the last slide. The response was somewhat split between negative impacts and no opinion on this. But I want to emphasize we're not alarmed by this. We do feel as though, again, the data that we reviewed indicates that it's really a minimal number of people compared to all the people we transport throughout the day that are impacted by this change. So we are recommending to move this one forward for October for implementation in the fall. The second proposal is a slight frequency reduction on the Orbit Mercury from 10 to 15 minutes during the weekday daytime. The enhanced 10-minute frequency was implemented years ago to help with capacity concerns that we saw on the route. We no longer have those capacity concerns for a number of reasons. Of course, we've seen a reduction in ridership during the pandemic. And then additionally, we've been able to increase the capacity on Orbit service with our new Orbit buses. With those considerations in mind, we feel as though a shift from 10 to 15-minute frequency on this route will continue to provide a high level of service. In fact, we feel like it's a very effective level of service, an improvement over the level of service provided on many other transit routes in Tempe and the region as a whole. For this proposal, the majority of respondents indicated they had no opinion about the change. So we recommend advancing it for implementation in the fall. And now the next 5 slides I'm going to show you all pertain to what we call our optimization of service in the area surrounding Guadalupe Road. The first option is shown here, the elimination of the Orbit Saturn. The chart shows that a clear majority of respondents are negatively impacted by this proposal. We've generally observed a very high level of support for maintaining the Saturn as part of our Orbit network. And so for this reason, we're not recommending that we move forward with this proposal for the elimination of the routes. We don't want to move forward with this one. However, there are 4 proposals as what we're calling option B for the Guadalupe Road service optimization. And the first part is shown here. It's no longer an elimination of the Orbit Saturn. Instead, it's a realignment of the Orbit Saturn to operate in the more east-west type pattern along Guadalupe Road. The route continues to serve most of the same destinations that the Saturn serves today. It's just a change in the routing. As you can see from the chart on the right, the majority of people indicated they have no opinion or would not be impacted by the change. So we're recommending moving forward with this one for the proposed modification for implementation in the fall. Also, as part of option B is a proposed realignment of Route 62. Essentially, I mentioned this is part of an optimization of service on Guadalupe Road. This reroutes the Route 62 away from Guadalupe Road to continue south on Hardy Drive into South Tempe. The service on Guadalupe Road would continue to be maintained by the modified version of the Orbit Saturn that I presented in the previous slide. Again, and similarly to the last proposal, the majority of respondents indicated a neutral impact or no opinion about the proposal, so we recommend moving forward with this one for implementation in the fall as well. Next, we have Route 65, an elimination of this route. This is, again, all in conjunction with the other two proposals that I just presented to optimize service along Guadalupe Road. We did receive a negative response from the community regarding this proposal. However, I want to emphasize that we do have mitigations proposed that we feel will counter some of those impacts, including the modification to Route 62, which I just presented, and an enhancement to Route 66, which I'll present next. So essentially, all of the areas that are served by Route 65 today will continue to be served by the modified version of Route 62 and an enhanced frequency on Route 66. So with this in mind, we recommend moving forward with the elimination of Route 65 for the fall as well. And then, as I just mentioned, an enhancement to Route 66 is going to be necessary in order for us to continue maintaining the capacity that we'd like to see during peak hours along the Mill Avenue corridor. Again, this proposal is in conjunction with the other three that I presented as part of our option B for optimization of service on Guadalupe Road. The majority of respondents feel positively about this change. So overall, all four of the options are being recommended to be advanced for implementation in the fall. And here's just a summary of the two options I mentioned, option A and option B. The first being option A, the elimination of Orbit Saturn shown on top. The second being the change to the four routes, the Saturn, the 62, the 65, and the 66. You can see the map on the lower portion of the screen pertains to option B, and really it shows that the changes we're proposing to these four routes continue to maintain service in really the majority of all the areas that we serve with those four routes today. We did ask a question during the survey to better understand and just really summarize the community's level of support for option A versus option B in our survey. And as you can see, we received an overwhelming level of support for option B. So we're recommending moving forward with all of those options as part of option B for implementation in October. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Eric for an overview of our efforts for the possibility of advertising on our transit system.
Thanks, Sam. So next slide. As the council has indicated in the last couple council meetings, looking for the possibility of introducing advertising into our system in Tempe. So we have undertaken a process, both internally and working in coordination with the region, who is, Valley Metro is undertaking a process right now, having a discussion with the board and the other committees and at Valley Metro to look at the possibility for advertising as a way to generate revenue for the region as well. Phoenix also already does advertising in their system, as most are aware. So we worked with our procurement office. We did a request for information to look at getting feedback and kind of get the temperature for advertisers on for the Tempe system. And the short summary of this is that there is interest, of course, in our assets in transit in Tempe for advertising. This would include our bus shelters, the Orbit system, the large buses on our major arterials, streetcar, and light rail platforms. Some of those are under the control of, obviously, Valley Metro, and some are Tempe assets. Some of the concerns about advertising are that it is something that can deteriorate the rider experience by just creating clutter on the bus, kind of visual clutter through the windows. It can also create clutter in the community. There's a little bit of wear and tear concern on the buses by having the repeated actions of putting the wraps on and taking them off. And then also just making sure with advertising that the revenues would outweigh any costs associated with it. So those are some of the concerns that are brought up. What we are recommending at this point, because we think there's still some good possibility of getting revenue that would benefit our fund and benefit the region, is advancing carefully on this item, recognizing the concerns of the community. So we are, staff is proposing to advance the larger buses in our system. This is the 40-foot and 60-foot buses for advertising possibility. And we would do that in conjunction with the region and the process that's going on with Valley Metro right now, looking at the region's entire bus system, larger bus system, to look at that. We would also at this point look at advertising on our light rail platforms, matching what is happening already in Mesa and Phoenix. These would be more kind of tasteful or controlled size advertising opportunities on our platforms. And then continue to look at the streetcar for possibility of advertising, much like we do with the light rail trains. We are not proposing at this point to advance the orbit system in our neighborhoods or our bus shelters for advertising. We would want to see success and numbers with the assets that I just mentioned. We'll have an action slide at the end of this presentation, but that's a summary on advertising at this point. Next slide. And then the next item that we wanted to update the council on is the request to look at the contract scenarios for bus service operations in Tempe. Prior to 2013, Tempe ran its service. Since 2013, Valley Metro has been running service in contract with First Transit, our provider. Tempe does retain ownership of the East Valley bus operations and maintenance facility, as well as all of our fleet, approximately 125 buses. So we are in the process, and council will receive the contract approval request for bringing on board an independent consultant that will look at the possible scenarios for bus service in the next 10 years, or really in the next era in Tempe and the region. This consultant would be coordinating with Valley Metro, coordinating with our neighbor cities, and ultimately come back to the council in the fall and then in the spring with updates and ultimately a recommendation on what's the best and most efficient way to operate our service. This has to do with an effort to understand, as one of our largest contracts in the city, and certainly one of the most expensive portions of our transit tax, understanding the best way to move forward and the most efficient and cost appropriate methodology for operating our service. We don't take this decision lightly. We want to make sure that the council knows this is a big decision. That's why we want to do a study. And there's no predetermined outcome about what the results of this study would be. We want to be mindful of the fact that we are part of a sub-region in East Valley, as well as the larger Valley Metro system. So more to come on this, and the contract approval for this consultant will come forward, I believe, at the end of or sometime in June at a council meeting. Next slide. And then I'm handing it back over to Sam for a couple more items before we complete our presentation.
Yep, thanks, Eric. So as Eric mentioned, we're excited to report some of these updates regarding our transit fleet. We're in the process of receiving 17 replacement orbit buses. These are essentially going to replace some of our older orbit vehicles that are due to be retired this year. This is a big improvement for our orbit system. It's going to make riding the orbit a much more pleasant experience for our passengers. We did complete a public outreach process and a federally compliant RFP process at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. We wanted to really ensure that the vehicles we receive are really the best fit for neighborhood circulator service in Tempe. And we're really happy with the way that that process turned out. You can see the new bus in the picture at the top of the slide here. Another exciting change rolling out to the fleet is the installation of these operator protective barriers. Essentially, as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we required passengers to board the buses through the rear doors. That's in part to better protect our operators. And in doing so, we've been unable to collect fares through the fare box. This new piece of equipment, and you can see a picture of one on the bottom left on the slide, essentially provides an added layer of protection for the operators and will enable us to return to front door boarding and resume collecting fares. We're looking forward to doing that again because we've been unable to do so for the past 12 years, and 12 months, and that's impacted the revenue that we've been able to collect. Another exciting project that we'd like to share is that last summer, we worked through a process to test 3 new types of electric buses on some of our routes. Basically, it was a proof of concept type testing. We'd like to work towards setting up some kind of a pilot program in Tempe to better explore this technology and really see how the infrastructure and vehicles work across our system. That project isn't funded at this time, but we're working diligently with Valley Metro and some of our other partners to see what opportunities may be available to help bring this technology to Tempe. And And then some more exciting news is the advancement of our bus shelter design project. You've all heard a lot about this already. Essentially, our new bus shelters will be available in 4 different sizes, and that's different from the 2 sizes we have available with our current design. And really the reason why that's exciting to us is because it makes the shelters more adaptable to the conditions that we have out in the field. This will allow us to install shade structures in locations that don't currently have shade available, and we're definitely very excited to roll that out. Currently, the prototypes are in development. Once the prototypes have been manufactured, we'll have a display for the public to come out and experience the new shelters. We'll gather their feedback. We'll make any necessary changes that we have to make before the designs are finalized, and then we'll roll them out into production. And with that, I'm going to head back over to Eric for the next steps.
Thanks, Sam. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we are looking for council support on the proposed October 2021 service changes. We do want to mention that on April 20th, we did take those changes to the commission, the Transportation Commission. They did support them with the caveat that, of course, no one likes to take away service. We want to make sure that we're minimizing impact to our residents and riders, but they did support those. And then we also want, we're seeking the council support in our advertising next steps, more formally taking out and getting numbers, working with Valley Metro on the light rail platforms, our streetcar advertising opportunities, and our large buses opportunities, but not advancing Orbit or the bus shelters at this time. Transportation Commission did also support this effort with some pretty strong concerns about clutter in the community and changing the character of Tempe, changing the branding, or affecting the branding of the regional and Tempe transit system. And so as part of our next steps, we would come back to the council with some more firm numbers and some visual depictions of what this program could look like. So we're asking to advance it to that next step. And then as far as what we would be doing in the next months in summer and fall as we would move forward, assuming council is supportive of the advertising next steps, move that forward, continue with the bus shelter designs, as Sam mentioned, and continue implementation of all the bus service changes that we're talking about. Come back in the fall with the bus service operations contract study. And then make sure we work really closely with our budget office and our department and Valley Metro to resolve and solve our long-term forecast for balancing our transit fund. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Excellent. Great presentation. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much, Eric, as well. Eric, one other quick thing before we start. Happy belated birthday, my friend.
Thank you.
I'm fine in terms of moving forward with the service changes and the advertising next steps. So both are fine with me, but I'm going to first turn to Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Eric and Sam, what a great presentation. You are both such impressive staff for the city of Tempe, and we're lucky to have you. So I really appreciate this presentation. Just want to make a suggestion for the advertising. I like the idea of advertising, and I would just like to give our local businesses first shot at it, just to promote our local businesses. And I know that they've been struggling. It's been a tough year for them. And if that's possible, to give them first shot at putting their ads on the buses. And I certainly would be supportive of the bus shelters advertisements also hopefully in the near future to generate some funds and keep our buses moving. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. And you mentioned that the bus shelter design, while we're going to continue with the design and getting more public feedback, in the CIP, we don't have any bus shelter construction planned for the next fiscal year?
That's a great question, Councilmember Cubie. We do actually have annual funding. It's a line item in our transit operations fund that is bus stop maintenance. And as part of that maintenance, we do installs of bus shelters. So it's a pretty strong line item, and we intend to utilize that for the installation of these new shelters. We do anticipate that we do anticipate that maybe there would be in future years a request to bolster that fund in order to install more if the council desired, but we want to utilize what we have right now, recognize the financial situation that we're in, and get through the design process and make sure that we have good designs to bring into the community.
Well, I mean, I recognize that money is always in short supply, but I'm just concerned because we really want to increase and promote the use of our bus system. And we know COVID has impacted that. And those who are relying on buses for transportation, you know, they require shade, and we can't expect people to be waiting in the blazing hot sun. So, you know, shade is so connected to transportation and to health, community health. And so I know that we have it's only about a third of our buses have shelters, and you know, I don't really know I know we have a plan to advance it by 2040 or something, but it just seems to be of more immediate need and more impact on citizens and residents of our city. And I'm just concerned that we're not advancing that as quickly as we should.
I completely appreciate the point. And yeah, we have 800 bus stops, and we don't see that changing too much in the future because we have citywide coverage for bus stops. And so that's a pretty fixed number. And about 40% of those have shelters. What I'd like to propose, because we do have a line item for our bus shelter installs. It's likely not as fast as you want. What I'd like to propose is that we get through our design process. We get a final design on the four shelter sizes this fall. And then I would propose in the fiscal year 23 budget process, we look at the possibility of increasing the amount that's dedicated for these fabrication and installs.
Well, you know, I thank you for that, but you know, I'd like to see it happen sooner because you know, 40% is nothing to be proud of. And why can't we look, for instance, at the possibility of having a neighboring business close to that bus stop, name a bus shelter or pay for it? Maybe there's a public-private partnership that will help the business to have a shaded stop, and it will encourage customers to take transit to that stop. So perhaps we could look at those kind of public-private partnerships that will benefit all of our residents. So, you know, I understand the constraints, but I also know that we're taking all of our COVID funding and we're putting it to CIP, and this is a CIP need that may be more important than some other CIP needs, or I think so. And, you know, we're also concerned about, you know, those folks that really rely on the buses to get them to places, and they're hampered with the reduction in schedule. I know that some of this is a necessary cut, and we've seen a real decline in ridership, and that's always a concern. But I'm hoping we're going to be listening to those residents and trying to figure out alternative methods of travel. You know, there's been a lot of, you know, sort of backlash in the community. I know sometimes we've had many opportunities for people to participate in the process and learn about what the changes in service will mean, but that you know, people don't pay attention until suddenly it's there. So we have to be aware of that and see if we can respond appropriately. And, you know, I'm for advertising, and, you know, I know there could be a visual clutter, but I think that it's important we look at that source of revenue, just as we look at source of revenues from the neighboring businesses in a public-private partnership with bus shelters. And I want to thank Councilmember Adams for that suggestion that we focus on our local businesses, helping to support them. That's a really good idea. Thank you. And also, you know, I want electric buses, and I want it sooner than later. And other cities and arid cities are doing it, so we should be able to find a way to have our buses be electric, and we can look to a lot of examples in arid cities for that best practice. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say two quick things. We have a scheduled update, I think on September 2nd, whenever our next quarterly update is for the council. We'll bring back to you some of these maybe creative solutions for installing more bus shelters, and we'll look at our budget to see where we can't beef that up and see about expansion or faster install of shelters. And hopefully we have a lot of efforts going on in the front, as you know, of electric buses and electric fleet. And there's some grant opportunities that staff and Valley Metro are pursuing. So hopefully we'll have some good news on that front at the September update as well.
Thank you so much. In that update, could we also look at where the shelters are in most demand, the most frequently most frequently used shelters or, bus stops? Because obviously, there's some that don't get that much ridership and others that get a lot more. And I imagine you've already done that as part of your study, but I'd like to see that when you report back. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Next up, Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Hey, E, happy birthday. Woohoo. Oh, you know what? But I can't be outdone by Sam over there. I think your birthday wasn't too long ago either. So,
Sam's was on Monday.
yes. So happy birthday to you both. And I just want to say thank you for what you guys do. And just so everybody knows, these guys are an awesome team when it comes to really advocating for public transportation, especially for the Tempe community. I mean, I couldn't ask for better representatives and employees that truly care. You guys are flipping awesome. And the fact that, we had an audit and finance subcommittee today at noon so we were already been together from 12 to 2:30. So just saying, I get to see these guys a lot and work with them frequently. And it's just really been a pleasure and a joy. And couldn't be more proud of the work that they do, and we should feel like we are in really good hands because we are. And I think the one thing that we have to continue to remember, and I've learned so much being the rep at Valley Metro, and Eric and Sam have really helped me in my knowledge, which sometimes makes me a little dangerous in a way, but it does kind of remind me, we have to remember we are part of a region. We agreed to be part of a region, and so we kind of have to play with everybody and make sure that our choices and our decision are also a positive impact for the region as a whole. And that's why there was some thought in regards to what the future looks like, right? Because obviously there are some positive things about being part of the region, but also there are some concerns. And you guys brought some of those up tonight, just the ability of where we go with advertising, what that looks like. Well, that's going to be bigger than Tempe. So that's a much bigger discussion than what we want. And we have to remember this is part of what we get when we belong to a bigger region. So I support the way that you guys are cautiously approaching advertising. I don't really know what to expect of that. I think we are a very classy city, and clutter is one of the things that we've really tried to stay away from. And what is too much, I think we'll have to work through that and what that looks like. And as a city too, being part of a region, there is no other city that spends more of their own dollars on transportation. We have so many people within the region that use their public transit funds, but not necessarily any of their own funds. And so we are kind of like our own monster in a way, where we spend a lot of our own money in the sense of really creating a comprehensive transportation system and trying to make sure we're meeting the needs of as many people as we possibly can. But at the sometimes that kind of gets us, when our budget isn't as healthy, that becomes a problem. And that's kind of where we are right now. So we see ourselves making these service reductions, which is totally disappointing. That's the last thing we want to do. But I know that it's been very vetted, well thought out, in the sense of the routes that can be reduced, the times that can be reduced based on ridership. And I know, Eric, we had a conversation about, the ridership within Guadalupe, the town of Guadalupe, and making sure that, they are comfortable and okay and understand, because maybe that is a main method of transportation. And sometimes it's hard to communicate. So I appreciate you taking the time to really work with them and talk to the city manager and the mayor, and making sure that we all understand, what these changes means. And doesn't mean that they can't change again. Right? I mean, I think that's one of the things that's going to have to continue to happen. So we continue to make service cuts. And one of the things that we talked about today at the Audit and Finance Committee is we continue to make service reductions, but yet the increase of spending continues to increase. So it's really hard to keep a balance. And Eric and Sam and their team do a really great job for us. So I just want to say thank you guys so very much for what you do. It really does mean a lot. And your decisions are based on data, efficiencies, on so many things. And I really look forward to kind of figuring out what's going to happen down the road, because as much as we want, to have bus shelters at every stop, that would be fantastic. Who wouldn't want that? Shade, I 100% agree with that. But at the same time, there's so many other things that we're trying to balance. And I appreciate you guys, doing the best that you can to get us in a really good position. So like I said, I just want to again shout out to the two weekly birthday guys, Sam and Eric. Thank you guys so much for what you do. I appreciate your thoughtfulness in this, and do agree with the process moving forward, and look forward to kind of hearing how things evolve, and what that means for Tempe and our residents. So thank you guys for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Next up, Councilmember Garland.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Eric and Sam, for your presentation. And I love all the details and the outreach that you've made to the community. So I really appreciate you doing that. I think that's so important when we make decisions to move forward. And I do support moving forward on the decisions and things you brought to us. I do have a couple notes that I took the other day. One of them is on slide 17, when again, it's kind of, everybody is mentioning about the advertising. So if I look at slide 17, there's 2 pictures of buses on there. My hope is if we were going to look at that we would look at the one on the bottom, and not so much that, as I like how you said visual clutter, I just had junky clutter or junky look on my notes. But so that's just one thought, is that if we have to look at it, I would rather something smaller than something really large. And I did put some notes down on what I thought would be helpful for us to be able to use promotion on the bus as well as selling for advertisements. But I was thinking, maybe we pick a couple buses that that promote Tempe events, things that are going on here in Tempe that are Tempe related specifically. Programs, I was thinking of like the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, having a couple buses that are reaching out to talk about the, the Marianne Quarter grants, or, the awards for the neighborhood, different awards that we have that we do our presentations, because some of the things that we are finding with the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, I understand, is that we're getting the same neighborhoods that apply for things, and the same people in the same neighborhoods applying for the different award that we give out. So it would be nice to, if these buses were driving around, other people would see it, and it might just kind of get their interest. And the other one is kind of piggybacking on, I had put down advertising for local businesses, as Councilmember Adams had mentioned, but I actually wrote down discount for local businesses. So whatever the advertising rate is, if we have a local Tempe mom and pop business, I would rather look at, if they're going to advertise, give them a discount for advertising, because they're in our city and we really want to promote them. So those are my thoughts. You guys do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we will, as I mentioned, we're going to come back, I think it's September, maybe October, with an update. And certainly we'll have, we plan to have a lot more detail on the advertising. These are all good pieces of information and input from the council. We specifically added, to your point, Council Member Garland, the image on the bottom there that shows a more controlled advertising space, for the specific reason that's one of the things we want to explore, and the region has heard that comment as well. We will also bring back information about how we balance a local community's interest in advertising and more specific advertising for that community with the regional system. So we'll bring that back, and kind of how that could work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Next up, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric and Sam, thank you guys. Great presentation. I love you guys' work. Obviously, we have to do some reductions on our routes, which is never a fun thing, but at the same time, you guys keeping it going, and I appreciate that. I guess probably I'm going to pinpoint down to the advertisement. Once again, it's been said by all. Explore it. I love it. I want to see what kind of looks are out there. So I hope to get a good cadre of visuals of what that could look like at a bus stop, what that could look like on a bus. Obviously, I do agree with Councilmember Garland about utilizing confined space, not so cluttery like the top picture that we see with Goldberg and Osborne. I think there's value in that. I think there's also value in it shows that your transportation looks clean, looks usable, and hopefully people are attracted to that. So I look forward to the presentation coming up in September. And like I said, with the advertising, please, I'd love to see those visual ideas on what we possibly could do and what looks appropriate, because I think that we definitely need to explore that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Any other council members? Any comments for Sam or Eric? All right, hearing none. Eric, Sam, I think you've got clear direction moving forward. Really appreciate the great presentation, and thank you to the 2 birthday boys. Really appreciate you guys. Great job.
Thank you, Council.
All right, next up, we have item 2D, which is the timeline for reopening Tempe City Hall and the council chambers. And I'm going to turn to our city manager, Andrew Ching.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'll keep my presentation brief. You have already had the opportunity at the previous work study session to hear from the subcommittee of our reopening group with a number of recommendations, chief among which is to move towards the beginning of having employees who worked remotely during the majority of the pandemic to start integrating back into city facilities, opening up city facilities to the public, et cetera, with a tentative date of June 1, which now is less than a month away. That is still true, and that is as true for City Hall as it would be for any of our various city facilities and buildings. And so one of the things I wanted to, just because I know that the committee has continued to work in the interim to look at this, and there are a couple of things that they are recommending, or at least bringing forward as additional recommendations that I wanted to make council aware of. One of which is to continue to offer, when there are meetings, the dual option of both in-person and virtual meeting. That's an important thing, because as we begin to kind of figure out to integrate, to allow employees back into buildings and to open up facilities and city offices, having the opportunity to have flexibility if someone happens to not be in the office that day for whatever reason, that they can continue to participate in an equal level with the employees who are in the office. So that's one thing I guess should be mentioned. Another thing is that, Mr. Mayor, you and I had an opportunity to speak briefly about a week or two ago, just about your sense. And this is something that really I would like for council to provide myself and the rest of staff some direction on, which is, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had at first limited council presence within the chamber for meetings, and we had no audience. Eventually, it got down to just the mayor, and then over time, everyone has been appearing virtually into these meetings. And I think we've seen some success. One of the things that I think would be important in thinking about reopening of council chambers is, are we satisfied with, and do we think that there has been a sufficient level of public participation as a result of the virtual format? Or is there anything that we can do in addition to that? One of the senses that I get, at least from my participation and observation in these meetings, is that there may very well be members of our community who, for whatever reason, whether it's work conflicts, physical limitations, or otherwise, are able to stream and to participate in the virtual meetings better than their ability to actually physically be present in the chambers. And I think, given the fact that we're still, recovering from and trying to work towards recovery from the pandemic, that it's probably a fair assumption that at the point when the chambers reopen and council business begins to take place in the council chambers again, that there will be some desire to space out, to have distancing between members of the public, council members, staff, et cetera. So one of the things that I would submit for your consideration is that, to the extent that members of the public are coming, and to the extent that the chambers will be modified so that there can be spacing between individuals to keep some physical distance, assuming that's still necessary, that one of the things that we would do is that we would recommend that city staff that is presenting would present in person when possible. And of course, obviously applicants for things like zoning appeals and use of permit appeals, and et cetera. However, that city staff who would otherwise be present at meetings previous to the pandemic, but don't have to present in person, would have the option of presenting or being present virtually. That we would continue utilizing the WebEx program for that purpose, to allow for members of the public, to allow for staff so that they can yield seats that would otherwise be occupied potentially by staff to the public, so that the public could appear both in person when that point is when that we would open up chambers for that purpose again, but also be able to appear virtually. So that is something I was hoping to get some feedback from. So the question would be, at what point is council interested in / comfortable with coming back into the chambers? And are you comfortable with, continuing to have some distancing and marking of chairs within the chambers, or at least initially, to provide some level of assurance? And then lastly, the notion of continuing the virtual option for both members of the public and potentially city staff. And I'll just say that, at least, and I don't want to speak for you too much, Mr. Mayor, but in our initial conversations, you had posited the idea that perhaps all of this could happen after the council takes its break in July, and that we would then have the first meeting after the summer break to be the one where we would start doing some of these in person. So that's another suggestion for consideration by the council. At this point, I'm happy to stop and hear feedback and to answer any questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. And no, you completely captured my comments correctly. My thought would be that we've got only a few meetings left until the council's summer vacation, probably about a 6 or 7 week gap that it typically is. And at that point, when we return to the chambers, I think it'll be good to just have some. First of all, I think that's good timing to return to the chambers. I also think that we should still mark off some chairs to provide some level of distancing for people who are coming back in, whether it's residents or, frankly, for the health and well-being of our employees. And also, I would like to continue to offer some virtual options for people to participate, given the fact that I've liked that we've gotten seemingly a little bit more public participation because we're offering that option. And secondly, because we all know that there are going to be some people who are going to be comfortable coming directly back to the chambers, but you're still going to have some people who are going to have some concerns about showing up to a meeting in person. We have to remember that vaccines are still, I know it's just starting next week, the Pfizer vaccine will be available to children ages 12 to 15, but that means there's still going to be a number of people who are not going to be eligible for the vaccine. And people are going to may say, hey, I'd like to come to the meeting, but I want to make sure not only to keep myself safe, but if I've got small children at home, to keep them safe as well. So everything you just talked about, I would vote for coming back in August to the chambers right after the council's vacation, to still do a little bit of spacing in the chambers, and to still allow some virtual options for people to participate online if they so choose. With that said, I'm going to go to Vice Mayor Keating first.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I'm fully in support of the August timeline and the pathway you've laid out, Andrew. This is a little off topic, but it does have to do with returning to the council chambers. I know we've talked about it before, but I just want to say it again. We need some sort of electronic voting system by August when we return to the chambers. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I can certainly have our city clerk, Carla Reese, speak to that, but that system is actively being pursued right now, just so you know.
Excellent.
That's great. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I definitely support Vice Mayor Keating in that pursuit as well. So thank you, Vice Mayor. Next up, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. Hold on a second. Okay, thank you, Mayor. Caught me in a mid sneeze. No, I would vote the August, coming back in August. I think that's just kind of timely. Just kind of flows easier that way. It's not so jarring, just confusing, I guess, continuing it out. And then, yeah, I could agree with the electronic voting system. So that's my vote.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Next up, Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the city manager for putting that presentation together and looking at our options to reopening. So I'm very excited about it. And I also am fine with the August timeframe. So thank you very much, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Next up, Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yep, Mayor, I agree. The August timeline is good, but also agree with Vice Mayor that the electronic voting system really needs to be in place. I think we need to work on that, and do support the opportunity for those to participate via digitally still in the future. And also willing to negotiate times at the meeting starts if that's something that we want to discuss maybe earlier. Just going to throw that out there as we come back together in a new comprehensive plan. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. I was going to ask you, since you brought that topic up, what were you thinking just off the top of your head?
Well, I noticed like lately we've been starting at 3. 3 seems like a pretty good time. Maybe get our committee started at 3, like executive session, and then possibly even the formal meeting at 5. Just throwing that out there, seeing if that might work, as a lot of people are able to participate via online now, which is kind of nice and easier, but something to consider and think about.
Mayor, I would agree with that. A 3 to maybe a 4 o'clock start time.
Sounds good. Well, let's definitely. I like the suggestion, and yeah, Mr. Ching, like let's definitely consider that as we kind of talk about the return to the chambers in August. I think it's a great suggestion to explore. So thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
Next up, Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't support a change in the start time because that requires more time taken off from work for those of us who work outside of council. So that's kind of a hardship. And I know this, you're thinking of this anyway, but I don't want to return to where we require staff to be in department heads, all to be in the room. I think we've all learned to be able to experience the meetings virtually. And I think especially for staff that have families, there's really no need to necessarily be there in person. There are times they should be in person, but they know those times. And as long as they're available to be called up for a discussion, that should be an opportunity offered to them. Because often you look across the room and you see mostly staff, and all of that time that they're wasting, where they could be at home on their computer doing their work and listening and coming when they need to be summoned is just, I think kind of wasted time. So just want to throw that in.
Thank you. Just to make sure that that my original point was clear, was that what you just said would be something that we would offer. In other words, if city staff, including city department heads, were not otherwise presenting directly to council and would then be in the chambers, that they would have the option, and we would not require them to have to be there present, that they would then be able to use WebEx to be present. Because I think one of the things we've learned is that when WebEx is working the way it's supposed to, it's really a very effective way for people who would otherwise not be there to still be present in that virtual sense. And we've integrated that for a while. Now the next step is, how do we take that experience back into the chambers and make it all seamless? And I'm confident with the timeline that I'm hearing that we can do so.
Sounds good.
No,
thank you.
I appreciate that. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure. I don't want it necessarily to be leaving it up to a director. Some directors may insist on it, others, shouldn't. So I think the policy should be uniform, and if it's offered to one, it should be offered to all.
Yes, that, like I said, with the caveat that if they are presenting on a matter at that meeting, that the expectation was that they be present. And again, there will be some trial and error, and I think we all understand that coming back after the long time that we haven't physically been in each other's presence in these meetings will require some patience, and we will figure these things out. But your point was well taken, and I feel harmonious with much of what I already said.
Great, thank you. And speaking of coming back to the chambers, the next person I call upon will be coming to the chambers for the first time in August, and that will be Councilmember Doreen Garland. You're next.
I was just going to say that I support what the city manager, Andrew, was saying. I support, Corey, what you were saying. I agree that it'll be nice to have an electronic system, although I don't know what it's like to not have an electronic system. But most of all, I want to say I am looking forward to August, since I have never sat on the dais like you. Well, Corey, I think you might have at the beginning, maybe. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'm in. I'm in with all you. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Garland. I definitely did for 8 years as a council member, but I'd never have as mayor. So I'm excited too to return to the chambers, the long-awaited return to the council chambers.
You and I can hold hands and skip in as we go, and it'll be our first time.
You've got yourself a deal. Okay, thank you, Mr. City Manager. Anything else?
No, I appreciate that. I'll just note that since your tenure as city council member, that we've completely remodeled the chambers. We only had a couple of meetings in the remodeled chambers before the pandemic, so it's in like new condition, I would say, and we are excited to get it ready in August for the return for council meetings in the manner that we've described. So thank you all for your direction. Much appreciated.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Appreciate it. Next up, we have item 2E, which is future agenda items. Council members may request that an agenda item be added to a future issue review session. In accordance with the Arizona Open Meeting Law, there should be no discussion on the item other than to clarify the request. Do any council members have any future agenda items?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, I don't know if it's here or the next one, but two things I would like to have agendized is the presentation from PD on their Narcan pilot that they've been doing. We recently just received an overview of that, and I think it's worthwhile that the council understands what our police department in coordination with ASU and other facilities within our community are doing to help drastically reduce the opioid epidemic and how they're tackling it. So I think that's be a great presentation. The second thing is, and I don't know if it would be for the work study or the committee of a whole, or I'm sorry, the council committee report out, but if we could also get a presentation or an overlook of trying to transition from gas-powered maintenance equipment for lawnmowers and blowers and things like that, that we require our contractors to clean our right-of-ways with. I would like to get the council behind on looking at a time frame to say within 3-5 years we are going to have a mandate to where we're going to require our vendors or our people that are applying for our contracts and services that they abide by. We are now going electric with those types of equipment so that we can, obviously keep our right-of-ways up to par, but also doing our part for the environment. And I think that'd be something that we would love to have presented to the council and have a discussion on.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Next up, we have Councilmember Cubie.
Yes, I just want to second Joel's request. And I know Craig has been working hard on this issue for a number of years. And our city has actually been testing out a lot of equipment. And we learned recently that ASU says the Holy Grail has been reached, and they're really happy with the equipment, the electric equipment they're using across all the campuses. So it feels like the time has come, and I think we can get there sooner than later. And I know Craig is preparing, I believe, to come back to council with his recommendation. I'm just so grateful that Councilmember Navarro is bringing this up because it's so important to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Really appreciate it. Any other council members, future agenda items? All right. Hearing none. Next item on the agenda is the call to the audience for committee of the whole items. Speakers have up to 3 minutes to address the city council. Madam Clerk, were there any speaker or comment cards received from the public wishing to address the council?
Mayor, we have no additional submissions.
All right. All right, so we've already taken item 4A1. We're going to go ahead and go to item 5, which are mayor's announcements and city manager announcements. I have a number of them. And I think I've got some folks who are right outside here. I'm going to put my mask on since there are other people coming into the office. Excellent. All right. So the first proclamation I have here is for Professional Municipal Clerks Week. This week is a time to celebrate and reflect on the important role that the clerk's office does for city government as well as democracy. The clerk's office helps to ensure that the public has access to the appropriate materials, information, and decisions taken by the city council, as well as ensuring voter information and election results are recorded accurately. Thank you to our clerk's office here at the city of Tempe. This office is the magic behind the scene of all of our council meetings, helping to ensure that they are running smoothly and openly. So to every employee at our clerk's office, and I've got a couple right here behind us right now, we want to thank you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and read a proclamation. Whereas the office of the Professional Municipal Clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government and oldest amongst public servants, is recognized each year during the first week of May. And whereas the City of Tempe Clerk's Office provides a crucial link between the residents and visitors of our city and the mayor and council, and whereas the offices of municipal clerks worldwide serve as the information center on functions of local government and community, and our Tempe City Clerk staff have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all for civic engagement, election processes, public records access, and other functions of local government. And whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of affairs through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, county, and international professional organizations. And whereas we at the City of Tempe want to extend appreciation to the employees who provide this exceptional service to Tempe residents, city staff, and mayor and council. Now, therefore, I, Corey D. Woods, mayor of the City of Tempe, Arizona, do hereby declare the week of May 2nd, 2021 as Municipal Clerks Week in Tempe, Arizona. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Who says we can't still do some really cool things in person and honor some great people? All right.
Mayor, this is Councilmember Garland. I just want to say thank you. I think it was to Carla for providing all the background information on what a city clerk was, all the history. That was really incredible reading about how how the clerk got started and where it came from, and the background information was great. So I just want to say thank you very much.
You're
Excellent.
welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland. All right, next up, item 5AB, which is another proclamation for the 2021 National Peace Officer Memorial and Police Week. So additionally, to be recognized, every year Tempe takes the time to honor these individuals who have lost their lives in the line of duty. For years, public safety has been rated as a top priority in our community surveys, and on behalf of the council, we want to thank the Tempe Police Department for showing up every day and doing the best job to serve our residents. I appreciate the department's ability to take this year head on. I know it hasn't been easy, but however, the department's willingness to engage in dialogue and be at the table as the city thinks of how to best serve each member of the public is really amazing, quite honestly, just absolutely incredible. With its current leadership, I believe that the Tempe Police Department will be a model for other cities going through an evaluation of the services they provide. So with that said, I will now read the proclamation. Whereas, as a nation, we honor the memory and sacrifice of fallen law enforcement officers during Peace Officer Memorial Week, dedicated by President John F. Kennedy in 1962. And whereas Tempe police officers and their families are members of our community, striving to earn trust, build partnerships, and keep the peace, protect lives, safety, and property, uphold the U.S. Constitution, and respect the rights of all those with whom we engage. And whereas Tempe police responded to 132,758 calls for service in 2020, over 11,000 calls each month. And whereas often the first ones on the scene, law enforcement officers regularly approach unsafe situations and risky scenarios that have led to law enforcement officers making the ultimate sacrifice for public safety. And whereas the City of Tempe honors the memory of fallen Tempe police officers, Albert Nettle, Cyrus Spangler, John Bradshaw, Robert Hawk, Kevin Weeks, Russell Welker, and K-9 officers Murph, Blue, and Deuce. And whereas the safety and quality of life of our community depends in great measure on the dedication, capability, compassion, and daily service of Tempe police officers. And whereas the City of Tempe honors and appreciates the sacrifice and bravery taken by each current and former member of the Tempe Police Department. Now, therefore, I, Corey Woods, Mayor of the City of Tempe, Arizona, do declare May 9th through the 15th, 2021 as National Peace Officer Memorial and National Police Week in Tempe, Arizona. Congratulations. And thank you for your service. And last up, we have item 5C, Mental Health Awareness Month. So we've spent the last year taking care of our physical health to stay safe from COVID-19, and that's of course very important. but it's also very important to take care of our mental health. Human connection has never been more important, and I want to encourage everyone to find ways to safely connect this month and beyond. A walk with a neighbor, a phone call with an old friend, coffee with a colleague, a takeout meal in the park with family. These are small things that we can all do to take care of ourselves and others. The City of Tempe recognizes the importance of mental health services and have had our Human Services Care 7 team in place for years. They work collaboratively with various City of Tempe departments and programs, including housing, homeless outreach, the Tempe Police Department, Tempe Fire Medical Rescue, and the Diversity Office. Thank you so much for everything you do. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and read a proclamation. Whereas the City of Tempe and Tempe Human Services Care 7 are recognizing Mental Health Awareness Month in May, and whereas mental wellness is vitally important as our community continues to deal with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas we are encouraging everyone in the community to focus on the healing value of connecting in safe ways, prioritizing mental health, and acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay, and whereas no one should feel alone in their struggle, and help is available for those in need. Whereas Care 7, the city's crisis response program, offers 24/7 crisis response services, counseling and support groups, youth specialists, and services for veterans, and works collaboratively with various City of Tempe Department programs, including Housing, HOPE, Tempe Police Department, and the Diversity Office. Whereas Care 7 also encourages residents to consider how they can make a difference in the lives of a friend, family member, or neighbor who might be struggling. And whereas the City of Tempe and Care 7 join advocates nationwide to promote an important message during Mental Health Awareness Month and beyond. You are not alone. Now, therefore, I, Corey Woods, Mayor of the City of Tempe, Arizona, do hereby declare Mental Health Awareness Month on May 6, 2021 in Tempe, Arizona. Next up, we have City Manager's announcements. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no announcements tonight.
All right. With that said, I'm going to move forward to item number 6 here, which is our next meeting date, June 17th, 2021. And with that said, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 6:44 p.m. Council, we have to go back and finish an executive session. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mayor.